Megan Teal, Marginian's having trouble getting onto the Zoom,
Okay.
but she will be here.
Okay.
I also have just one more person who needs to hit A, assuming that they are in fact here.
Mm-hmm. All right, we can now move on to, I don't have any comments tonight, so we can skip over that and move on to approving the agenda. If you have any amendments you'd like to propose, you can do that now.
Yep. Megan, President Reeser with an amendment.
Yeah.
So I'm motioning to amend our the policy paper on student financial aid to include a new updated Appendix B. It's in the agenda where it's the highlighted yellow sections for a new set of PCRs and some background, but we just need to update that appendix to include that section.
All right. And could I get a seconder for the amendment?
Councilor Mendes.
Thank you. And Melissa, are you okay to make that change in the appendix?
I'm sorry, I'm messaging with a counselor who can't get into the Zoom. I'm trying to troubleshoot that too. Sorry.
Sorry.
That's okay. So we're looking to add the additional set of PCRs in the appendix. Is that?
Yeah, it's just the yellow, the ones that are yellow in the currently linked one, we just need to accept those that are actually a part of the appendix now. So basically they just need to turn non-yellow and then we are.
Okay. Perfect.
All right. Are there any objections to making this amendment? If you'd like to object, you can use the raise hand function or just turn your mic on. Okay, if there are no objections, we can proceed with the agenda as approved. Are there any other amendments? Sorry, President Reeser, did you have your hand up? Oh, okay. Okay, if there's nothing else, then I'll look for a mover in favor of approving the agenda for tonight.
Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Councillor Tom, and a seconder.
Councilor Mendes.
Thank you. And we can now go on to Turning Point, and you have 2 minutes to vote. All right, unless anybody's having any issues with voting, I think we'll keep moving. All right. So we'll move on to our presentation section. And first up, we have Western Hillel, and they're doing their Holocaust Day of Remembrance, Holocaust Day of Remembrance presentation for 10 minutes. So whenever you're ready, if you have a presentation you'd like to screen share, just let me know and I'll stop sharing this.
Megan, I think they're just gonna speak from the screens themselves. So if you want to stop sharing, I think I'll just speak then.
Okay, perfect.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I'm Jamie, and I'm a second-year science student at Western. I'm also the Holocaust Awareness Committee Chair at Western Hillel. So my role is basically to lead the team that coordinates all of Holocaust Education Week and Holocaust-related programming throughout the year at the university. I also connect with other minority groups on campus to promote genocide awareness and diversity.
And I'm Chava. I'm a fourth-year linguistics student, and I'm the VP Advocacy at Hillel this year. So it means like mainly I get to work with committees like Jamie's and see all the great work that they do. But I also work a lot with the university to help make Western just a safer and a more inclusive space for Jewish students. We also have our Hillel president here. Her name is Rena. So if after this you have questions about Holocaust education or anything we've talked about, you can feel free to reach out to any of us. And we don't really have a PowerPoint or anything. We just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about what today is and its significance.
So today is recognized as International Holocaust Remembrance Day. We remember the 6 million Jews and millions of Roma, LGBTQ, and disabled individuals who were murdered by the Nazi regime. Today's also the anniversary of the Red Army's liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration and death camp. Every year, Jewish communities around the world recognize Holocaust Education Week as a time to continue to learn and remember the Holocaust, the victims, and honor the survivors. So Holocaust survivors have spent decades telling their stories and educating communities all over the world about the Holocaust. Throughout my years at Jewish school and in my local community, I met many Holocaust survivors who bravely shared their experiences with us and challenged us to think about concepts such as tolerance, mutual respect, and human rights. Survivors are the foundation of Holocaust education at its core. Saying goodbye to my great-grandmother in 2019 brought me to the unfortunate realization that very soon the last generation of Holocaust survivors will no longer be with us. But the memory of the Holocaust cannot die with this generation. In Judaism, there's a phrase called Lador Vador, which is a Hebrew phrase for from generation to generation. I believe that these words can be used to accurately describe what needs to be the future of Holocaust education. It is our job to continue what the previous generations have started. Holocaust survivors have courageously lent their voices and shared their stories, and the best thing we can do to honor that is ensure that their voices and stories continue to be heard from generation to generation. With that in mind, we are lucky to be able to welcome Holocaust survivor Judy Cohen to Western tomorrow night over Zoom. We realize that with fewer Holocaust survivors available to tell their stories, that it is crucial to bring speakers like Judy to the Western community to share her experiences so that people may hear firsthand about the atrocities that occurred during that time.
Yeah, personally speaking, I know that I didn't fully see the importance of Holocaust education until I got to middle school. I had a joint middle and high school. And it was really because as a child, I was privileged to live within a Jewish community that regularly commemorated Holocaust remembrance. So we had events run by the local community center, both throughout the year and during Holocaust Education Week. We had regular memorial services on the days of remembrance, and it was built into my school curriculum. Like it was just such an integral part of our life. And when I moved, I entered middle school, my family moved away from the community. And for the first time, I was the only Jewish person in the school and really the only Jewish person in my community. And this is when I learned what it felt like to have a community not just exclude Holocaust education, but they seemed barely aware that the Holocaust had ever even really happened or what it was. We talk a lot about the importance of Holocaust education, and I know Jamie mentioned a lot of really great reasons for her. It's tough because there's no one reason. There are endless reasons. Everyone has their own personal story to tell, their own connection, whether you're related to a survivor or not, or Jewish or not. Like it's going to influence why you think it's important. For me, Holocaust education is important because without it, we not only forget the history that happened, but we foster a culture that denies it ever happened in the first place. As Jamie mentioned, we'll soon lose our last generation of Holocaust survivors. I know I said goodbye to my grandfather many years ago, and it's still something that's very personal and very sad to a lot of the community. However, something that we consistently run into is that the Jewish community is working very, very hard to keep Holocaust education alive, but that as I encountered when I was in high school, they're often the only people actively taking roles in keeping Holocaust education alive. And the unfortunate truth of it is that while the Jewish community are the people pushing, this is an incredibly personal and sensitive topic for a lot of us. A lot of us are related to new survivors in the family. This is really only going back a few generations. And it pulls on threads that are still very relevant today. So a lot of the time when we talk about Holocaust education, some pieces of the details feel far-fetched, but the ideas of what we're talking about are just still very present for a lot of us. And something I know that a lot of Jews just in the world, but at Western would really love to see is moving Holocaust education into a more shared space where it's kind of like shared between Jewish and non-Jewish communities, so that together we can combat things like Holocaust denial and alleviate a little bit of that emotional burden on the Jewish community to ensure that this chapter of history isn't forgotten. I know for myself and for a lot of people, Holocaust education is particularly relevant. As I mentioned, anti-Semitism is still alive and active and present. And it's often only the Jewish community that talks about it, which is unfortunate, but it kind of creates that like echo chamber where we hear it and we hear how much we need things to change. And then we mention it to people outside of the Jewish community and are often faced with questions or doubt, or even just people saying like, that can't be true, that couldn't have happened. For instance, only a few weeks ago, a synagogue in Montreal was defaced with swastikas, right? And the perpetrator was holding a gasoline canister when he was apprehended. As I know from personal experience, as I'm sure many people here know as well, the drawing of swastikas is something that still happens fairly regularly on Western's campus. This year's a little bit odd because we're all online, but that's a whole separate thing that we can get to as well. But just that it's something that still very regularly happens on our campus. And, you know, it's something that Jewish students notice and try to bring awareness to. And I know that it feels like it shouldn't have to be said, but the amount of times that I've had to explain to people why the drawing of swastikas is harmful to the Jewish community, that alone is upsetting. Like the amount of people who just like don't get why that can be an upsetting thing for a Jewish student, or really any student to see on campus. As I mentioned, in cases of online acts of anti-Semitism, roughly 25% of the time it involves Holocaust denial or threats of genocide against Jews. If you guys want, we've collected a couple of like news articles that like state the stats and point to a couple of the incidents we're mentioning. So feel free to send me a message afterwards, and I'm happy to send those along just for, you know, future reading and all of that. But even just beyond attacks online, there have been TikToks or TikTok trends where people pretend to be Holocaust victims. And this past December, there was an attack, like a virtual attack on the website of a Jewish day school in New York. And the entire website was basically taken down and replaced with images of Nazi rhetoric, propaganda, and threats. And that's what every student, when they logged onto their school website that morning, that's what they saw. So what we need now, basically, as the purpose of telling you that, is more education. We need more support to call out acts of anti-Semitism when you see them. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, also called IRA for short, defines anti-Semitism in a non-legally binding way as certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical or physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and their property, toward the Jewish community and institutions and religious facilities. So it's elements like this, if you see, so it's not just outright attacks, but rhetoric, propaganda, comments. If you see them in your like that definition in your life, it's important to speak out against it and not let it fester and continue. And something I really want to like commend this group for is a few years ago, the USC actually passed a motion to officially recognize this definition of anti-Semitism, to recognize the importance of Holocaust education, and to recognize today as International Holocaust Remembrance Day. So that's something that I like. Steps like that are so important. We really appreciate the allyship in this area and are very excited to be able to continue to partner for things like Holocaust Education Week, because it's how we work to create, you know, a space where Jewish students just feel safe to be and to exist, right? To be on council, even to be part of a group that recognizes a specific definition of anti-Semitism. You know, a great way to continue that is by going to things like Holocaust Education Week, but also just to educate yourselves, right? There are plenty of great museums all around the world, in Canada, the States, all over. But there's also some notable ones that have a lot of really great online resources. So the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and Yad Vashem, which is the World Holocaust Remembrance Center. And I can also send the links to Megan as well. And I think like something I really want to point to is, you know, I'm reaching the end of what we're here to talk about today, is there's an excerpt from Hannah Arendt's book, Eichmann in Jerusalem, The Banality of Evil, that I find particularly relevant when I think about the importance of Holocaust education. Put simply, Arendt said that evil comes from a failure to think. She personifies thought and then continues to say that anytime thinking engages with evil, it becomes frustrated because it finds nothing there. She said these things when describing watching Eichmann's trials after World War II and the Holocaust. She said that unlike her previous assumptions when actually facing him, he didn't strike her as someone who had a particular disdain for Jews, like as she had assumed, but rather he seemed like someone who was more interested in his own career and seemed unaware of the impact of his actions. And what's important here is that Eichmann was one of the most brutal Nazi officers, and yet her observations didn't seem to match that level of horror. And what I often take from this is that anti-Semitism doesn't just exist in spaces when where people hold prejudice. It exists in spaces where people allow it to happen. I remember the first time someone else in a group I was in called in a friend for an anti-Semitic comment before I had to do it, and they could see I was clearly uncomfortable. And this was exactly 1 year ago because it was during Holocaust Education Week, and I've rarely seen it happen since. It's something interesting is that I instantly felt a level of comfort with that friend that I'd never felt with a non-Jewish friend, right? It's that comfort and that safety that I didn't even realize I wasn't feeling with everyone else in my life. It's important that we work towards calling out anti-Semitism for what it is, because passively allowing it to continue is still harmful to the Jewish community.
So with Western's Holocaust Education Week coming to a close tomorrow night, our greatest hope is that the student community has been made aware of the dangers of hatred and ignorance, whether from the past or even today, against marginalized communities. Now more than ever, it is our responsibility as the next generation of leaders to continue on the legacy of survivors by educating our communities about the Holocaust and to speak out against anti-Semitism or intolerance that we may encounter in our day-to-day lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Our next presentation is from Radio Western. So whenever you're ready, and I can pull up the slides if you'd like.
Thanks,
And
Megan.
I can distribute those resources, Hava, if you send them to me. I can message you my email. Okay. All right, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Declan Hodgins. It's great to be back here. And I'm here with our station manager at Radio Western, Tim, to deliver a presentation to the USC about Radio Western, what we do, and just some general information that we want to kind of present to you as kind of, I guess, an accountability and relations mechanism. So I am the treasurer of Radio Western. It's kind of my retirement project to a certain extent. And I serve on the board as a volunteer. And then, yeah, Tim is the leader of our actual station operations. He handles full oversight over all the broadcasting and such. We can go next slide. Sorry, the purpose one. Yeah. Okay. So purpose of the presentation is to inform council about the operations and finance. And we also want to create some kind of dialogue and just an opportunity for some kind of community outreach. This isn't for explicit approval per se. We're a legally independent organization. Interestingly, our membership includes all of the members of the USC, as well as all of our volunteers. but we're a legally separate corporation. We have our own board of directors that's already approved the budget that we're going to be showing you parts of. However, you guys will soon, as council, be voting on a budget that, unless Mark has any surprises for me, will include our fee. And we want to make sure that you have information about kind of like where that fee's going and what we're spending it on. We also just love going out in the community, building awareness and building relations with more groups around campus. Next slide. So about Radio Western. Radio Western, we are 94.9 FM. We're a community radio station. We are based at Western University, and we've been broadcasting since 1981. This Halloween is our 40th anniversary. I found that out today. We broadcast 24 hours a day. We have a mix of spoken word programming as well as music. And our program hosts are both students as well as members of the London community. We are mainly funded by a fee of $1064 per student. For at least next year, that's what it will be. This year, it's I think 11 something, paid by all Western undergraduate students. As well, we have smaller amounts from advertising and sponsorship. As I said, we're legally separate. We have our own board of directors. But we do contract a lot of corporate services from the USC, including accounting and other things. Next slide, and I'll pass it off to Tim, I believe, for this one.
Hey, everybody. Am I on?
Yep.
So, yeah, Radio Western broadcasts 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And traditionally, before COVID-19, almost all of that has been live to air from the broadcasting studio at room 250 in the UCC, where I'm sitting right now. Well, in an office, not the broadcasting studio. It looks fancier than this. We broadcast programs in 12 languages and have been a cultural hub of the London immigrant community for decades. Much of this programming is produced by and for international students. You'll hear it if you turn on Radio Western on much of Saturday and most of Sunday. It very often won't be in English. We broadcast music shows in every musical style under the sun, from folk and indigenous music to smooth R&B to heavy metal to location recordings and the sounds of kitchen appliances. We truly do have something for everyone here. And I can add to that we also have special days of programming for particular marginalized communities and racialized communities. We've been broadcasting live play-by-play from every Mustangs game we can get to since 1981. And our news department writes and broadcasts student-focused newscasts on a daily basis. Next slide. We broadcast over the traditional FM airwaves from our transmitter on the roof of One London Place, the tallest building in the city, and our broadcast signal can reach as far as Kitchener on a good day, depending on atmospheric conditions and so forth, because of radio. Listeners can also tune in via a plethora of smartphone apps, a web stream, a Rogers digital cable channel, and occasionally our YouTube and social media feeds. The reason I say occasionally is because if you've ever tried to broadcast popular music over YouTube or a Facebook video feed or something, it shuts you off almost immediately. So we can only broadcast on social media things that we create in-house, spoken word programming, sports, etc. Live music performances. Our station is licensed and regulated by the CRTC, that's the Canadian Radio and Television Commission, and royalties go to the songwriters for the content that we play. Next slide. Radio Western provides a safe environment where students can learn all about media broadcasting and content creation. Everything from hosting and curating music shows, which is the obvious one, to producing recording studio sessions with local and touring artists, announcing sports games, writing and producing radio ads, which is harder than you think, creating social media content, including video production, and oodles of less obvious things like database development and management, web development and hosting, broadcast regulatory compliance and reporting, and figuring out how to keep track of our almost 200 station volunteers. We also have a library of about 70,000 CDs and records, not an exaggeration, that also gets maintained. Some of these opportunities are paid positions through the Work Study Program, Canada Summer Jobs, or other grants. Radio Western also provides one of the only communication links between the students of Western and the London community at large, which can be used to educate the average Londoner about the fabulous positive things that are happening at Western. It's more than just parties in Richmond Row. And I'll add one thing to that. I don't have the most current figures, but as of a couple of years ago, there was a survey taken in Canada where over 90% of everyone who gets in their car to commute to work in the morning turns on FM radio, just across the board. And when they turn on FM radio, the first thing they're going to hear is commercials on almost all stations, except for us and the CBC. And then they start scrolling through the stations, and there's a good chance they're going to land on us at some point. And so that's a lot of people. That's a lot of listeners, even though it may only be for a few minutes a day. And that's a great way that you can, that Western's activities and sort of just the positive things about Western can get to those people's ears. And it's been underutilized, I think. Anyway, next slide. Because we have this COVID-19 thing, despite doing all we can to keep our offices and studios safe with regular cleanings and using disposable microphone and headphone covers and limiting room occupancy to one person per room, almost all of our UCC production operations were paused in March when the first lockdown hit. Since then, there's only been a couple or three of us that have been coming into the station at all. However, as a testament to the dedication of our volunteers, we've managed to continue to keep almost 55% of our 24/7 schedule running with bespoke individual weekly shows produced at home by the volunteers. The production quality of most home productions is obviously not up to our usual standard, and we look forward to getting away from sort of Zoom quality, no offense, and being properly, quotes, air quotes, professional again. But for now, like everyone else, we're doing the best we can. And our staff has also been largely working at home. We've rigged up all kinds of cool ways that they can connect into the computers here and stuff, so stuff can continue to be managed. Now I'll pass things back to Declan to talk about money on the next slide.
Yeah, so obviously one of the things we're here to talk about is where the money goes, because again, there is a fee that all students pay, and we want to be accountable for how that's spent. So you can see here, this image is a screenshot out of our audited financial statements. We wanted to show you that to just show you the position we've been in. And to be honest, we haven't been doing well in the last couple of years. We've not been doing well. What you can see here is that not this year, but the two previous fiscal years before this, we were losing almost $100,000 a year. And there's a number of reasons for that. Our student fee has been going all over the place, and we've been having big cuts into that. That's led to declining member capital, which is kind of what we're worth. We've also been overspending, and we realize that, and we're committed to pulling a turnaround on this, because what we need is a full turnaround on this. So you can go next slide. I want to talk about our fee as well. This is the really important thing for you guys. If you go back to like 2015 or so, our fee is historically around $13.15. However, in 2017, 2018, there was a referendum that was passed. There was a number of options. Students had the ability to choose from a variety of different fee levels. And the students chose to put the fee to $10.50, which would be phased in over a number of years. And as you can see here, it's been steadily declining since then. And this coming year that is going to be in the upcoming budget, that is under the referendum, the last year of this fee being cut. Now it is $10.50 plus inflation, so it's actually $10.64. Further hurting our revenue, actually making it way worse, was the Student Choice Initiative, where we saw about 20% of people who normally pay fees opt out. So we recognize we've had our revenue go down, and we're taking a serious plan to cut our spending, scale back what we do, and be sustainable as an organization. And ultimately, it is council that does set our fee. Next slide. So before I show you the budget itself, a few notes on what we're doing. So as I said, yes, we're being conservative in our estimates of what our revenue is going to be based on our fee. It could turn out to be higher, which would be great, and would help us start to rebuild the amount of capital we have. But we've got a plan based on where the fee is at right now with 31,000 students. Our budget was developed from the ground up, and everything was around, again, sustainability. How do we be sustainable? And as a result, we had to cut several staff. But ultimately, our new plan is a plan that is we're going to be breaking even on our budget. We're going to be making, we're not going to be spending outside our means. Next slide. So I don't want to go into any of the super detailed things, but we've budgeted for cut spending, and we've tried to be more realistic with our projections for fundraising and ads, but also using ads and fundraising to reduce our reliance on the student fee a little bit. We've made big cuts. Among them, we've cut our staff compensation because we've cut staff. We've had to scale that back so we can be sustainable as an organization. You can go to the next slide. We've also done things like cutting the amount of telephone lines, finding efficiencies, and really trying to trim the fat. And that's also, and there are a lot of fixed costs that we have that we can't cut back on, like the admin fee to the USC, SOCAN for compensating artists, and transmitter operations. But we have left a budget in for capital purchases, because again, that's an important part of sustainability. And if this budget goes on track, we should make just over $1,000 in the next fiscal year. Next slide. It's back to Tim.
So our plan moving forward, our plans to really build the best facility and platform that we can in order to be ready for September. This involves everything from staff restructuring and training. Part of that is me, by the way. I'm a new station manager. I just started in June at the height of COVIDness. So that's one part of it. Technical upgrades, marketing and awareness plans, and redesigning our program schedule to broadcast the right things at the right times for our market to the best of our ability while still meeting our regulatory requirements. That whole right things at the right time issue is a really big one that has been sort of underacted on for a long time. We can do a lot better there. While Radio Western has had a long and profound relationship with the London community for almost 40 years, it has become too culturally separated from Western students, and it's time to bring our student media back to the students via more focused programming and more outreach. Radio may be the original streaming service and the original social media, but the traditional slow and bureaucratic model of radio management no longer suits our market. It's not what the market world, it's not what the media world is anymore. Our creative work environment needs to be more like Snapchat and TikTok or Instagram, and less like boring old commercial radio. Value for students. We provide a radio station for students and community members to listen to that is catered to student interests. We provide valuable experiential learning opportunities for students looking to go into broadcasting, journalism, and music careers. Adrienne Arsenault, who's the anchor for CBC News, she didn't even know she wanted to be a journalist until she wandered into Radio Western completely bored one day, and someone handed her a sheet of paper with the news on it and said, "Read this on air." We represent and elevate diverse voices in our community through our spoken word programs. We help local and up-and-coming artists get exposure and airtime. We report on sports, news, culture, arts, and music all around Western and London. Next slide.
So anyhow, thanks for listening to this presentation. We hope you've learned a little bit about Radio Western, and we're happy to take any questions that any of you guys have.
Feel free to use the raise hand function if you have any questions. Or if you can't find it, you can just unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hey, Declan. Sorry. I was just wondering if you guys had any plans on kind of promoting Radio Western to students a little bit more. I know a lot of students might not use Radio Western that much, but is there any plans on increasing engagement across campus?
Yeah. Thanks, Brandon. I'm going to let Tim answer most of this, but suffice it to say, yeah, you're right. We haven't been doing a good enough job in the past, and we're really going to be focusing on that going forward. But Tim can take most of this.
Oh, yes. I could tell some hilarious examples of students not knowing about Radio Western. And that's on us. And I've I mean, it's to the point where I actually want to hire somebody part-time as effectively a radio station evangelist to just wander around campus with a tape recorder and talk to people, and you know, find out what's going on in various labs and various you know, what's going on in sports training things, everything else, just all the stuff that's happening. And you know, you read about it, frankly, a lot of it you read about it in Western news. And we just need to get people out to that stuff, because they're not really going to come to us right now, but we can go to them. And I think it's I mean, super fun job anyway. So that, and then we do, if you look in the budget, we have a little bit of a chunk of money to spend on advertising. Which is another thing that just hasn't been happening at Radio Western. It's just getting our name and our sort of image out into the world more than just on the monitors in the UCC. There's a lot we can do with that. And it's going to be one of the, actually, in my opinion, it's going to be one of the funnest things that we do in the next couple of years.
Thanks.
All right, are there any other questions?
Not a question, but just a comment. I grew up in London. I spent most of my time here, except for a period of time that was in Waterloo. I just want to kind of mention my support for Radio Western. Coming from the Latino community that immigrated here after the Salvadoran Civil War, one of the shows that's been there for decades, La Voz Hispana, has been a great voice for the immigrant community here in London, especially for Salvadorans.
Thank you, Councillor Beltran.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Councillor Ali.
Hi, so I had just a kind of a brief question about how some of your programming might adjust if like the current COVID state continues as currently, and how you could see that potentially impacting the budget moving forward.
That's on Tim.
Yeah, it doesn't, I mean, it changes things a little bit. It's kind of weird when what we have learned from having to adapt to COVID is that when we're not doing COVID, we have lots of people. We have lots of volunteers, lots of people who want to do lots of things. And we can come up with lots of interesting things to do, and it makes for good programming. In COVID, we have way less people. And so that reduces our expenses because we don't have to support that many people. But on the other hand, we have to kind of dig deeper to get the programming that we get. And we have a lot of technical issues. Something that is kind of strange is that, I guess people don't think about, is that we had people here almost 24/7 here in the studio, and they would show up with their laptops or with their records or their CDs or whatever they were doing, or their guests to interview. And they would go live and they would, you know, turn the volume up, and they would go out over the air and do their thing. And so very little of our programming was pre-recorded or pre-produced. And now in COVID, we have to be able to facilitate way more of that, which then adds expense because we have to get different equipment and we have to spend time training people. And so it's a whole different kind of battle to fight. And I think in the end, it comes out, I mean, at this point anyway, it comes out maybe a little bit cheaper to run the station sort of without any volunteers that are coming into the station. But our quality drops because we don't have the same production quality when people aren't here and we're not actually mentoring them and actually, you know, really hands-on, much like, you know, doing classes. When people have to do things remotely, it's not the same experience. And the difference, I think, in operating costs is really, it's very small. It's probably less than 5 or 10%. So going forward, I mean, we're getting by. As I mentioned in the presentation, we're over half of our programming, and that's 24 hours a day, is still original bespoke programming for that particular day. created by any of about 150 people, I think, that are making our programs right now. And if the COVID thing continues the way that it is, it's just going to continue the way that it is for as long as it lasts. And we're going to be spending, money on things that have to deal with supporting that. And then as that phases out and we go back to being a regular radio station again, then everything will just shift back to pre-COVID functionality, so to speak.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? We probably have time for one more. All right. If there are no other questions, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. And one more thing I'll quickly mention. If anybody out there in this meeting is like, I have a cool idea for something that should go on the radio, definitely reach out to us. We're here for you. Imagine, as I've said to people before, imagine you're 11 years old and it's like Christmas or your birthday or something, and you open up a present and it's a mixing board and a microphone and a record player and a place to plug in a laptop connected to a transmitter on the tallest building in the city that reaches like 100 kilometers in every direction, and you can do whatever you want with it. It's kind of a cool thing. So come use it.
That was very persuasive. Next up, we have our USC budget presentation from our VP St. Pierre.
Megan, did you want me to share screen? Or I think I have
whichever you prefer. I have it up, but it's whatever you like.
I'll share screen just so I'll keep track of it. Feels funny presenting this. I feel like I've been looking at this for a long time. Cool. Awesome. Hi, everybody. So obviously I'm Mark, VP Gov Finance. So again, I'll probably go through a bit of like logistics around the budget first with all of council, just so you know maybe what the next steps are and how this is going to unfold, as this isn't just a one meeting presentation process. So I'll just start off by kicking off by welcome to the USC budget season. So we'll obviously have this presentation come forward, then we'll have the ability to talk about it at committee, and then we'll vote on it again at the special meeting of council. But this budget has been vetted many times already. It's been about a 4-month process, and then we've gone through different levels of organization. And so now it's here to see public eyes within the council, and then also we'll go to the board of directors from the corporate end of things. So I'll just quickly discuss maybe kind of like the role of the budget itself, and I'll go through where the different lines kind of sit within the USC, so you all have an understanding of what you're looking at and how you're going to engage with it. And then we'll go through what the major changes are, some of the student fees, and then we can talk a bit more at the end about if there's more questions, just generally overview. Like I had said in my email, I'd ask that we do have any specific like line by line questions. There's about 50 spreadsheets that went into this. So I would ask that you just have those questions asked to me beforehand, or email me directly, or come to the GNF meeting where I'll be talking directly about each line and the executive budgets themselves. And I'll give a bit more detail and more rationale, just so we don't take up too much of council's time. But the role of council in the budget process is the student fees and executive budgets. We go to GNF committee every month just to talk about the exec budgets and go over what's been spent so far. So you'll see that kind of rolls into there, and then you'll see the student fee portion as well. And then our USC board of directors, they oversee the corporate operations, financial oversight, and the organizational risk. So you are the first body seeing this within this realm. But again, the corporate operations will all go through the board of directors, which we'll talk about in the next few cycles. So I'll just quickly go over the budget strategy first, and then we'll get into what COVID looks like and then what some of the numbers look like this year. So I'll start off by going through the budget strategy. So the main thing that this was partially me, but also most of the executive had a say in it was, what is our like prime goal? What are we trying to get out of this year? And I think that's the affordability while keeping money in students' pockets and also enhancing the student experience, which is our mission at the end of the day. So you'll see throughout this budget, there's a lot of prioritization of that student-facing programming, and that's where most of the money has been either invested or reallocated to, just to make sure that we're able to provide those services to our students. But then again, the student fees have not changed materially. So you'll see this is kind of like a reinvestment of where we're at within the organization and how we're building forward to the future. So I'll quickly touch on COVID-19 and what it's impacted. Obviously, it plays a big role into what I do on a day-to-day and how I've been managing the budget and how this looks for the organization. But the whole point of this budget is to set ourselves up for success coming out of COVID. Obviously, supporting students has changed a lot in how we reach different areas of campus and also the online world. So I think that's how we've kind of reframed this, is like, what are we looking to invest in for the future and making sure students that are coming back to campus after the pandemic, or who are also maybe studying online, are able to access our services. So it's kind of setting up for success, streamlining those corporate practices. Because like I had said previously, we're really trying to invest in the executive lines and make sure those student-facing programs are the ones that are being prioritized. Because at the end of the day, that's our point as a USC. That's our mission statement. But again, we're still looking to serve our students within those corporate practices. It's just making sure that we're prioritizing that money to the programs of the executives. And that's what we'll see within the student fees. It actually is probably a more transparent budget than you've seen in the past with other corporate budgets, just because a lot of that money has been put on that executive side. So it allows us to be flexible with the organization. If you go through the budget I had sent out, I know I didn't give you too much time to go through it, so hopefully in the next week or so you can read through it. You'll see we're not projecting that same $1 million revenue on our operations side, which was able to subsidize those fees. So I've had to be pretty creative on how I allocated the money and where things are sitting, but I think this is a reasonable and digestible student fee bill, as well as making sure that the new executive still has the autonomy to make those decisions and decide on what the changing and shifting environment is. I think the last thing I'll say is I was asked a few times about if there was different scenarios that I was running through, or when I was making this budget, if there was something specific that I really wanted to highlight. And I'd say it's hard as a $30 million organization to run a online budget, a mid-level budget, and a final fully in-person budget. But I think we've done a good job about being conservative and understanding where the current environment sits. I don't want to say I promise that I know what's going to happen in 8 months, but I do believe that I have a strength of understanding where we're at as an organization. So I hope it's reflected within this. So now I'll jump into student fees. So student fees, obviously this is a big part that funds those student-facing programs. If you look at the fee bill that we've released over the last few years, not much has changed. And this year, not much influentially has changed. But I'll just highlight the actual fiscal numbers change. So you'll see about $40 has changed from the fiscal 2021, fiscal 2022. So I'll highlight those quickly in the next slide of like what the materiality and how that's actually changed. And then I'll go through maybe a bit more of the impact on the executive budgets and what you'll see there in the investment we've seen. So this is, again, not fairly material for a change year over year. A lot of it is included with inflation. I think it amounts to about 4% of the actual student fee bill, which is not too much, especially considering the contractual obligations we have. But again, I just highlighted this. King's is less the constituent council fee, so that money will go down on that side. And this also includes like the LTC and health and dental plans. So those are obviously programs that we run and are highly contingent on what happens in the next year. So I'll just quickly highlight the 3 areas of focus that are the really big changes within the actual student fee number, and you'll see the $40 is reflected there. So the health and dental plan is the first big one. Obviously, that's a new transition to the new plan, and to increase our stability and make sure that we have the flexibility moving forward to cover our students, we have increased it by 7%. That 7% is under the cap of the referendum fee, and it's going to allow us the ability to be flexible in the future and make sure we're expanding coverage to cover off those incidentals, or if there's something that maybe we want to expand vision care in the future, the trust has the ability to be stable and to do that. Whereas currently we're not in that position, especially as a board of trustees, we've talked about this a lot. So that's kind of where the health and dental piece is coming from. And then the LTC contract, we've been able to get a 1.8% pending agreement. There's still the need to go to commission, but that's kind of where we're leading to as the LTC contract. I know there's been a lot of consideration about what that deliverable looks like. So I'm open to answer any questions about that afterwards as well. And the rest is just 1% to 2% inflation. You'll see a lot of the exec salaries will go up by about $800 based off of the policy we have in place. And stuff like that is all more inflation based. So you'll see a lot of the increases aren't due to anything materialistic itself. So I'll just quickly go through exec budgets. Again, if there's like line by line questions, please email me directly. There's a lot that goes into the fees themselves. So I'm obviously open to answer everything, but I want to make sure we're saving our more strategic questions for later. So I'll just quickly highlight a big portion of what we've talked about is making sure that we have supports in place for our students that are during the pandemic and post-pandemic, and then investing in our students. It's something we've seen this year. We've talked a lot internally within the organization and even within our CIA, and we understand that investing in those student voices and making sure that they're being paid the right amount for the work they're doing is probably of most importance. So I'll highlight the big 4 key areas of change. And then when I'll go through the exec budgets, I'm not going to go line by line. I just picked out what's changing on the exec budgets. But if you want to go through the document, and feel free to check it out over the next week or so and find some questions if you have them. Please let me know. So I'll quickly touch on major changes. So the 4 major changes, the first one was investing in student leaders. That change is due to coordinators and associates. So what we've done within our executive budgets is we've upped both the coordinator honorarium and our associate salaries. The associate salaries is due to summer work. So you'll find that I talked to government finance about this a little bit, was we have our associates working over the summer. So they'll bill up some hours there. So that's where the money is being invested on that end. And then on the honorarium side, you'll see the coordinators, we were upping all of their honorariums as well. I'll directly highlight the peer programs. It's a great initiative that the USC runs. It's something we really value. And we want to make sure that we're paying those coordinators for the money they deserve. So you'll see in the exec budgets, I'll go through and highlight them. But all of Hannah's under the VP SSP is going to 3,000. And then the rest of the exec budgets are all going to 2,500 for their honorariums, just to make sure students are being paid for the hours they put in. And then the second big piece of this is our peer support training. We want to make sure that our peer support and volunteers are getting the training they need to support the people that come into the center, and to also make sure they're being ever-changing environment. Obviously, peer support is something we do and something we like to prioritize, and it's something we wanted to make sure that they knew was going on. So the peer support training has been up to about $20,000. We've incurred this cost this year just on the corporate end, but I think this is something that should be reflected within the operations of the Peer Support Center. So it'll be about $30,000, which is pretty common for any peer support training that we go through. And the last 2 big ones are student engagement and relationship building. Student engagement's a bit of a 2-part piece. So the first part is the Ambassadors Program that we've kicked off this year with the new executive. It's been a priority of our executive, and it's something we really want to work towards in the future. So I'd say the big change on that end is we've added an Ambassadors Program line to the President's budget, and we've also added into the communications budget just to make sure that we're staying on top of like what the next steps are and how we're engaging with students, because our relevancy really comes to the end of the day of how we're engaging with those students. Obviously, the different environment with how we're engaging both in person and online. So we want to make sure we have the money to do that. And the last portion is relationship building. So obviously with the recent incorporation of UCREW, there's been a big investment on the federal end to make sure we're doing the right advocacy to the right people. And so you'll see the bump up of the federal advocacy line, and you'll also see Women in House has gone up. And there's also an additional line I'll go through at the end. And those are all just to make sure that we're getting our student voices out there and engaging with the right groups. So those are the 4 big changes you'll see. And that's kind of what makes up about 90% of the changes on the exec budget lines, especially the coordinator and associate honorariums. And then I'll go through the rest of the changes at the end. So I'll just quickly highlight the president budgets. Like I said, there's a bit of a sum on the total budget end, but I'll just quickly go through like what's changing directly. I'll highlight the coordinator and associate appreciation. That's going up by $500 just because we want to make sure we're investing in those students. President Roundtable is something we want to prioritize as well. And then the Ambassadors Program, that's obviously a new line there, which is we're putting at $6,000, which includes both the program and the honorarium. So you'll see that's why the difference between the last fiscal and the new fiscal. I'll swing down to the VP University Affairs. So the big difference here is you can see I highlighted the AVPs. You'll see how they're all getting an additional bump just for that summer work. And then you'll see the honorariums for the coordinators have all been bumped up to $2,500 to make sure they're being compensated for their work. And then the other big shift in the VP UA and the VP EA is removing the coordinators on the campus campaigns and then the external campaigns down to the VP CPA portfolios, just because the campaigns falls more under comms anyways, especially on the public affairs end. So that's why we're doing that. So the recognition program is the last one I wanted to highlight here, is we're doubling the budget. And again, like Vic had mentioned at the last meeting, we want to prioritize student awards and make sure our students are being awarded for the work they do on and off campus. So we're just doubling that budget to allow the committee to do the work and make sure that students are being awarded for that. So I'll just jump to VPEA. So you'll see again, I highlighted just the coordinators changing. They're shifting the 2 coordinators under VPEA to the comms department, which I'll highlight at the end. And then you'll see we're bumping the federal advocacy line, and we're also including $500 in provincial advocacy just to help support an author of a paper for the policies within USA. And then again, the Women in House is going up, and in elections readiness, that's kind of the last big line that's going up, just because we do believe that there'll be provincial and federal elections coming up within the next year, and we want to make sure we have informed student voices, and that's kind of the big priority within that range. And then I'll touch on Hannah's budget quickly. It's funny, I didn't list all the coordinators and associates because I didn't want to bore you with a couple spreadsheets, but this is without the coordinator and associates. If you want to look at the full document, feel free to check out the one I sent. Those have all just been streamlined similar to what you saw in the previous budgets. But you'll see within we really wanted to allocate money to the peer programs. The money was taken away last year as a general line, and it was divided out per program. We also believe that cross collaboration between the programs is really important. So we wanted to add a $7,000 line back just so that they're engaging with different groups on campus and making sure their voice is heard. The second part of this is the soft subsidy. We saw the soft subsidy used fairly heavily this year, obviously with affordability in mind. So we're going to bump that to $1,000 just to make sure we're covering more softs, as we know that they're very valued volunteers within our program. And then the peer sport telephone, we realized there was a safety concern, so we added the number back in, just because if somebody's ever in the peer sports center, need to contact somebody, they don't have a cell phone, we want to make sure they have access to some sort of communication. So that's why the line was added. And you'll see this peer sport training just at the end there, the $20,000. That's kind of the bump up to make sure that our volunteers are being trained in the right way and they're getting the information they need to support students. Awesome. So I'll just highlight mine. Mine actually, I think, streamlined except for the honorariums and the associates, but I'm moving one of my club operations honorarium is now going to be back into the club support honorarium. I think the two coordinators have been great this year, but I think there's ability to streamline some of that workflow. And that's kind of the priority within the club system right now, is to make sure that people are going to the right groups or committees to make sure they're getting the right information. So I think by streamlining into 2 different coordinators instead of the 3, we'll be successful in the long term. Again, not much has changed in my portfolio other than the basic increases. So, and the last one is the VP CPA. So you'll see the big changes are adding 2 coordinators, which came from the other few portfolios to make sure that we're streamlining how our workflow works. And then again, the student engagement line that was introduced a few years ago and then was pulled last year. We believe it's pretty important, so we put it back into the budget this year. And again, you'll see the coordinators and the AVPs are kind of the big flex on this. So I'll say out of all the executive budgets, the big change is those kind of investments in students and making sure they're being paid the right amount for the work they do. So that's kind of like the highlight of all this. So I'm not sure how long that was, but if there's any questions about the general overview right now, I won't get into too many specifics about the budget lines themselves, but please look into it, ask me questions. I'm looking forward to answering questions. It's gonna be a long process, so I'm here to help.
Yeah, we have a few more minutes for questions if anybody has anything pressing.
I have a question actually. So this might be something like you can answer later on. I'm not too sure where it falls in terms of vague or specific. So in terms of, I was looking at kind of like this, like the peer support programming, like kind of overarching theme. Would extended EDI training be covered in that particular kind of ideological umbrella of the budget, or is that something that you'd prefer to speak about a little bit more specifically next meeting?
So I do believe they cover it as a portion of the peer support training. I think it's like a portion of that training. I'm not sure exactly what's in that training. I would probably defer to Hannah to detail that. That's usually what we've incurred. But we also have on the corporate side, there's a budget for EDI based training. And that's something that we prioritize this year on the corporate piece as well. So that is included on that end.
And has that budget been extended or expanded at all? Like, or is that something?
It's like shifted to as like instead of just being a part of a budget line, we kind of created its own line. So it has its own like section of the budget itself. But I won't get into too much of that. It's like more the corporate end, but that's just like
we can talk more specifics next meeting if that works a little bit better.
For sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
And Eva, I'd be happy to answer questions on what that training includes as well.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. I'll reach out.
Councillor Prue.
Hi, Mark. I noticed when you were going through these budgets that everything seems to be going up. And obviously there has to be a reason for that. So, and nothing was going down. So maybe if you're able to elaborate on that.
Yeah, for sure. So like, do you mean just like as a student fee kind of thing and like what we're investing in? Is that
No, not in the student fees, primarily in the executive budgets. I noticed that when you're going through the individual lines, everything seems to be like you're able to allocate more money and you're able to allocate more money here and more money here, but nowhere does money have to be taken away.
Yeah, for sure.
So is there like obviously there's got to be some sort of reason that you have access to more funds this year than you did in the past.
Yeah, so I'll highlight the big thing we did, and what I had mentioned before was like the streamlining the corporate end. So the student fees themselves, we'll get they come from like most of the executive budgets, but they do have like a corporate administrative fee on them. So a lot of it is like you'll see like the corporate end is we're taking about 130K loss, and that is to make sure that the money itself is being prioritized for the executive budget. So that's a prime example there is like we're increasing the honorariums, but we might be taking away some additional support pieces that were just inflationary at that point. So you'll see the student fees haven't moved, but the money's been available, if that helps explain a bit of it. And then also the other piece of this is enrollment as well. Enrollment for Westerns has gone up, so there is more money available just because that's how the student fees work. So if that helps clarify a bit of that.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
We probably have about time for one more question. If anyone has anything. All right, if nobody has anything, thank you very much for the presentation. But I believe you're up again for bylaw 1.
Let me just see if I can switch to my bylaw. There you go. Oh, that's January Council. I got my taskbar in front. Let me just share it.
Too funny.
I have too many tabs open. I think my computer's hating me now. It's funny. Cool. Awesome. Here we go. Okay, this presentation should be a bit smoother. I think I've given it a few too many times now. So I'll quickly go over the oversight of this. Again, bylaw 1 is kind of like our core bylaw within the USC. I would ask if there's any like major things that you're concerned about. We would bring that back to agenda committee if we're going to make changes, just because again, it's something that we had to go through the lawyers, we've had to go through board, we've had to go through council at the committee levels. So we just want to make sure that we're highlighting that to you as a council, that it has been gone through many different areas. The lawyers have given me a lot of great feedback. So I'm excited to show you what kind of where we're at. I'll also toss to President Reeser at one point, just to give a bit of a overview of the long-term planning. So just to start off, if you haven't been able to look through it, I've kind of just highlighted the bigger changes that you'll see. The rest is mainly clerical, just making sure the wording makes sense, making sure it's readable for some students, because I know, especially within bylaws, it's sometimes hard to understand what's actually going on. So we tried to clarify a lot of that. The big addition here in the first couple sections is external affiliations. Obviously, by signing on to external groups, we do take a bit of a risk on taking on that additional responsibility. So we just wanted to make sure that the USC was always being prioritized. This is a pretty common line across student unions across Canada. So you'll see it says just as a corporation is always going to be the priority in terms of bylaws and core values, which is just prioritizing the Western students. And that's kind of where the reason is the external affiliation line came from. The second part of this is the long-term planning section. So I'll send it over to President Reeser to talk about the long-term planning section. This is just additional bylaws, but I'll throw it over to him to highlight this directly.
Yeah, no, and gladly, and thanks so much, Mark. And yeah, so then I guess that first section that he showed is just kind of the introduction saying that there is a long-term plan, and that was a change. But the kind of biggest piece that kind of plays into this and is a part of our core bylaw and bylaw 1 is section 3. So it's our organizational planning. And so if you've had the chance to read through it, you probably noticed that there's the 3.1 and 3.2, but they do play all together to kind of form 4 pieces that create what formerly was just our original strategic planning documents. And instead what we've been able to do with this is really split it into pieces so that there's numerous opportunities for all of our key bodies of the USC to play a role in the planning and the outlook of the organization. So I guess to take you through just briefly in terms of what each one is, so that it's all very clear. What we're intending to do with each one is that kind of starting at the aside from bylaw 1, which is obviously like our core identifying document, there is what we're calling the charter, which is that kind of first core document that very basically indicates our mission, vision, values, the very basic pillars of what the USC does. And again, it's not going into any of the details or the how, it's more of just what does the USC stand for? And you'll see that it is quite a bit of a timeline in the sense of 10 years there. And that is something that, again, if things were to be needed, it isn't completely set in stone, but we're recommending that timeline, just given it's something that we think needs time to show its legs and really, and also isn't something that changes as frequently, given it's just the core of what we have set out to do. So that is the kind of core charter, then kind of funneling down and almost like a down flow in terms of like it permeating to the next step. There's then what we're calling frameworks. So these are the documents that, if you picture the charter as the skeleton per se, then these are the muscles. These are what would be the lenses in which the USC and every single piece of us operates. So the ones that we're working with within this and we're wanting to have by the end of this year and by the end of our term is sustainability and then EDI are two. So one and one are, they're both separate, but also have some overlap and can really work together. But it's something that we're wanting to ensure that anyone who comes into the organization who may have more or less background in any of those topics are able to have that permeate throughout their entire work or whatever they're doing in the organization, be that our food and beverage at Spoken Wave, be that our advocacy priorities and anything in between. So that's kind of there. And then those are the, I guess, two newer names. And then for III are 3, and then 3.2 tactical planning. Those are ones that you would be a lot more used to. Section 3 of that is our policy papers. So that's something we're really wanting to empower council to really take hold of and work with our executive teams in future years to really educate the stances of what we're doing, using those frameworks to educate how they're approaching those and really keeping those in mind. And then, as I said, the 3.2 tactical planning is what you would know as our roadmaps that every executive team has the liberty to create every single year based on some of these foundational documents, but also having a lot of freedom to be able to prioritize what they ran on and what they wanted to do. So the kind of core statement I like to use in this whole process and why this was all created is to allow for continuity, to ensure that year over year we still have an identity and we still are the USC at a very core level, but we're never hindering the creativity and the flexibility for our incoming executive teams. So that is kind of that in a nutshell. But also once we pop through this remainder of the slide deck, I'd be happy to answer any further questions on that process.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it. It gives me a bit of break from speaking too, so that helps. So awesome. So the next part of this was the annual budget section. So we talked to the board a lot about this because it kind of falls within their purview on the budgetary capital side of things. But just to give council a heads up as well, we're looking at changing. It used to list that we would have a 3-year operating budget and a 10-year rolling capital budget. If any of you know the trials and tribulations of the USC in the last few years, that's almost next to impossible. So we've been updating it to a 1-year operating budget, which you just saw presented, and we'll continue to talk about over the next few weeks, and then a 3-year rolling budget. It just makes it more feasible for us as a USC, especially on the finance end. And it's something that we can continue to show year over year and make sure that the continuous executives are showing that they're improving or making changes. So that's kind of like the next big part of the budget process. The last few parts are more clerical. The first part was just the board meeting. A lot of it's just adding in clauses to let the speaker of council or let the board chair call online meetings. So you'll see the word electronic means is used a lot here. This is my legal term from the lawyer for what they said. So it kind of falls within that preface. Again, the second part, another part here is just if we're filling vacancies, we have a council resignation and replacement policy. So that just falls within that policy to make sure we're redirecting there. And then the last part again is that speaker of council may choose to call in person or electronic facilities to call a meeting. So it gives some flexibility if there's ever a future situation similar to a pandemic, or if the speaker chooses to use a mixed model in the future, it gives the ability for them to do that within our bylaws. So I think that's the last of it. If there's any questions about any of that, feel free to ask them. I'm sure the long-term planning is a more specific part, but yeah, feel free.
Yeah, we have a few extra minutes for questions if anybody has any. All right, not seeing any hands. We can move on to our 4 action items. Thank you for the presentation. First up, we have an election. Okay, sorry, I'll just pull up the slideshow here so we can see the motion. All right, hopefully everybody can see this now. All right, so I will be looking for a mover and seconder in favor of this motion.
Counselor Ali, I can move.
Thank you. And can I get a
Tremendous.
seconder? Perfect. Thank you.
I can
Counselor
second then.
Edwards. All right. Oops. Okay, wait. No, we're good. All right. I believe we will be taking nominations from the floor.
Yeah, so we'll take nominations from the floor. Just obviously, if you're planning on running for any of these or like applying for any of these positions, you can't sit on the hiring panel for the position that you're interested in applying for. That would be a huge conflict of interest. You do need to have pretty significant availability for the next few weeks just to go through this process. I sent out an email yesterday outlining all of that, but if you need a reminder on the details, message me and I'll send you what the availability requirements are.
If you'd like to nominate somebody else or yourself, feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand.
Counselor Kotadia, I'd like to nominate Counselor Ali.
All right. Counselor Ali, would you like to accept the nomination?
Yes, I would.
All right. All right. Are there any further nominations? Okay, not seeing any other hands. I believe we can just do a confidence vote on the motion. So if you are in favor of the motion and comfortable with Counselor Ali as the selection, please vote on Turning Point.
Just waiting on 4 more votes. I'm going to close the polls in 3, 2, 1. And the motion carries 97% in favor with 3% abstaining.
All right, congratulations. Our second motion here, I'll look for a mover and seconder.
Counselor Ali, I can move it.
Thank you. And a seconder.
Councillor Folia.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Counselor Fuller, you had your hand there. I just missed it. Okay, and we will take nominations. Oh, sorry, it's application based.
Nope, nominations from the floor.
Oh, okay. There must just be text here in the notes from something else. Okay, we will do nominations from the floor then. My apologies.
Councillor Bisworm, I'd like to nominate myself.
All right. Are there any other nominations? Okay, if there are no further nominations, we can do the combined confidence vote and approval of the motion in one on Turning Point. So please go and vote.
Sorry, Megan. I hate to do this to everybody. So Ethan, I'm sorry. One of the, I just want to double check something before we finish the vote, because I believe it can't be a returning counselor, and I know you're running for council next year.
Yeah.
So let me just double check that and make sure.
Fair enough.
I was muted there, sorry. It cannot be a returning counselor. So I'm sorry, Ethan, as much
Fair
as.
enough.
Sure.
Yeah. I'll rescind my nomination then.
So we'll still be looking for someone, a nomination.
Councillor Bajaj, I'd like to nominate Councillor Omarodian.
All right. Councillor Omarodian, do you accept the nomination?
I unfortunately am unable to accept the nomination.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Megan. Councillor Folia, I'll nominate myself. Sorry, I was just looking at my schedule and everything in your email, or Melissa's email.
All good, thank you for the nomination. Are there any other nominations? Okay, seeing no other nominations, then we can go to vote on Turning Point.
Just waiting for 2 more people. Okay, one more person. I'm going to close the poll in 3, 2, 1. And the motion carries 97% in favor, 3% abstaining.
All right, congratulations. We can move on to our third motion. I'll look for a mover and seconder in favor of the motion.
Counselor Ali, I can move it.
Thank you.
Counselor Maradian, I can second.
Thank you. All right. I believe we'll be taking nominations from the floor for this one as well. So please.
Counselor.
Sorry.
Mastronardi, I nominate Counselor Paez Gomez.
All right, thank you. Counselor Paez Gomez, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do. Counselor Gomez.
Counselor Ali, I would like to nominate Counselor Baldwin.
All right, Counselor Baldwin, do you accept the nomination?
Sure, I'll accept.
Okay. All right, are there any other nominations? Seeing none, I believe you will do a 1-minute speech. Does that sound okay, Melissa?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Counselor Paez Gomez, you're nominated first, so we'll have you up first for the speech. You have 1 minute.
Yeah, for sure. So hello, my name is Sophia and I'm a freshman student. Oftentimes people do not consider the distinct role women play in the shaping of policy and budgets. We see power in leadership and in progress when women are introduced to the table. I want to bring a different perspective to the hiring panel to make sure that the candidate has the intersectional lens that the USC so desperately needs right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Counselor Baldwin, whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Thank you. So my name is Ryan. I am one of the Ivy counselors this year, and I also sit as the chair of the Governance and Finance Standing Committee. In that role, as well as last year's role as one of the associate finance under Declan, I think I have some great experience with the USC and the governance and finance role. I think I can bring a lot of knowledge, institutional knowledge, to the role to make sure that we are hiring the correct VP Governance and Finance for the upcoming year, especially in these really turbulent times. We want to make sure that the USC stays stable and ensures that our financial stability as well as our governance stability remain strong into the future and into this upcoming year. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So, Megan, I'll just answer your question out loud. I do have a Google form, if that works for everyone. I think Julia is, so the CRO is on the call as well, I believe.
Yep, I'm here.
Cool. If you're good with it, Julia, I'll post the link in the chat and I'll share the form with you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So there's the link.
So once you voted in the form, please remember to go on to Turning Point and vote for the passing of the motion itself too.
If you're wondering why we're collecting the email addresses, it's just because we need to make sure that the people voting are actually supposed to be voting, because there are 60 some odd people on this call. So I just want to be able to double check that your votes are confidential.
Are we putting our USC email for it?
Ideally, but if you've already put in your Western one, that's fine. So just remember, once you vote in the Google form, go over to your turning point and vote there as well. We've got one more person to vote on the Google form, but 10 more people to vote in the turning point. Megan, let me know when you want me to close it.
I think we're good. We have had it for a few minutes now, so I think that's reasonable.
So I'm going to close the turning point one and let you know that the motion passes unanimously. And then I'll let Julia and Conan make the announcement around who won the spot. If that works for you, Julia.
That works for me. Can I just do it whenever?
Yeah, if you're Megan, that's up to you.
Okay. Congrats, Ryan. You won this spot on the hiring committee.
Congratulations. All right. Next up, we have our exec reports. And I can screen share those.
Megan, I was just gonna say, do we want to do our hour and a half, like our 5-minute break at the hour and a half, or I'm.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. Thanks, Matt. Okay, so we will come back at 8:40 then. All right, if everybody wants to start coming back, we can get going with the exec reports. Did you want me to screen share them?
Sure, yeah, if you don't mind, I think that would work on our end.
Sounds good. There we go. All right, whenever you're ready.
Perfect. Yeah, so then I guess we can hop into my first slide. Okay, amazing. So again, hey everyone, I know we have spoken already a little bit with our presentations today, but I guess we have the pleasure again to tell you what we've been up to for the past, I guess, a little bit longer than normal, but to make it right into kind of the meat of what I've been up to, I guess you can see the kind of 4 points. I try and keep these fairly consistent in terms of each month I do these updates because these are kind of the major priorities and uses of my time thus far in my term. So I guess the first one in terms of sustainability, I guess I wanted to highlight something that's pretty exciting. I know about this time last year, you probably heard me say the word mug program more than I can count. So it's been exciting. We've been able to actually get in contact with Queen's AMS and some of their operations that have a program quite similar. We actually have some really good starts going there. Got a lot of information from them. So there's an option there as well as the possibility that we may just create one that we can run within the spoke ourselves. So I just wanted to highlight that because that's extremely exciting for me and as well as our team. So I just want to highlight that is probably something that is on the go and coming soon, hopefully. So wanted to let you all know about that. Also, there is a, within PACES, the President's Advisory Committee on Environmental Sustainability, there is a meeting of just the student representatives with the admin next week, which is really exciting as well. We were able to get that and just be able to flesh out the student priorities for that important group. And then, yeah, and I want to highlight that obviously because that's a passion of mine. And then within organizational planning, we're obviously with our elections underway, we're going to get, and we just hired our incredible panelists already, and we're getting ready for that there is the executive transition that we're getting ready for very shortly. There's also been, as I spoke about earlier, and we'll have the motion later in this meeting regarding long-term planning and the charter and some of those documents that we're working with, and we're really excited about the process there. Will be really exciting to move forward with and set up for the coming decade, the coming 10 years to come. And then as well as I've been able to support, obviously Mark has worked incredibly hard and he'll be speaking to you during his slide about the budgeting process. But I've been able to play a role there working with some of our staff and just kind of creating the strategic vision and working together with him on that. Within student engagement, we've, as Mark highlighted in the budget, the USc Ambassador Program, we've done some planning there and we're really excited what that has to bring. There'll be a council town hall I hosted before the break, and we're gonna have one early next week. It'll be Monday, and I'll post a link after this meeting just so everyone can have that. There's a lot of posts coming from the exec, so I didn't wanna drown the link, so I wanted to wait until I flagged that to you. But if you're able to, make sure to pop by if there's any questions or anything you wanna talk about. I'll just be there for the hour and we can chat anything through that's happened tonight or you wanna see moving forward. Executive shadowing has been going great, and we've been seeing a lot of new faces and some familiar faces, which is excellent. And then I guess to jump into campus life, we've talked about this before a little bit, but we've definitely been moving along with the renovations in the UCC. So that has been really exciting. We're seeing our that kind of peer program and peer support combined space in the ground floor moving along, and we're really excited to see that come to fruition, as well as the club space on the second floor to better serve our incredibly large but really important club system on our campus. And I guess, as I love to do my song recommendations, definitely that is literally my most important song right now in my life. So definitely if anyone is into checking that out, I would highly recommend. And with that, I will pass to Victoria. Or I guess, sorry, I'll stop. I'll do questions on anything I've said there, and then I'll pass to Victoria. My bad. Okay. Any final, last call, any final questions on that? Perfect. Okay, then we can go to Victoria.
Awesome, thanks. You'll have to bear with me. It's a long update. You can't imagine how many things happen in a university affairs portfolio and nobody's on campus, but it's been 2 months and a lot has taken place. So I'll try and be brief. I try and also keep the same kind of consistent headlines. So I'll start with academics. I've been working over the break with the like acting vice provost academic, and now with John Dirksen having returned, working with him. So I've put together a brief of student feedback, or taken from student feedback, that's been summarized into ways that professors can improve their courses this semester. Just kind of highlights some of the things that students thought were good, some of the ways students thought courses could improve for this semester. So it's broken into 3 sections: ways that students can interact with course material, ways that students can interact with other students, and then ways that students can interact with their instructors. So it gives them different recommendations, things that they can single-handedly, like on their own, choose to implement in their courses. So I'm working with the vice provost academic now to work on like a distribution kind of tactic plan for that, so that it can be given to all the associate academic deans, and then they can disseminate it to their faculties, and hopefully we'll be able to see some of those improvements implemented into different courses this semester, and also moving into the future if online learning sticks around. On Proctor Track, I wanted to give a bit of an update that over the last I guess like couple months, this file has taken up a lot of time for me. And I know also I've been working really closely with my equivalent at the Society of Graduate Students, as well as Lena from the Western Student Senators. And so we went through a procurement process to look at alternative vendors to Proctor Track, and the advisory selection committee that the 3 of us were a part of provided a recommendation for either an alternative or something in addition to Proctor Track, that the university is currently in a stage of confidential contract negotiations. So we'll see kind of what comes of that, but we have put forward a formal recommendation as something that can either be included in addition to Proctor Track or as a replacement to Proctor Track. And then also for your information, I guess the university will now be sending out a weekly email to students enrolled in courses that use remote proctoring to help them navigate using remote proctoring, reminders like uninstalling Proctor Track after every time you use it, things like that. So we're hoping to increase the literacy of students on using remote proctoring services as well. And I'm continuing to work with the student protection subcommittee this semester to work on Western's communications, improving that, as well as on our end as well, from the USC, looking at how we can communicate kind of the story of Proctor Track to students as well. And then they'll also be offering live drop-in support 7 days a week, also for students who are using remote proctoring services in their courses. And then the last point, I put it under the academics pillar because it does impact academics in the work that we've done so far. But myself, my team, Mackenzie and her team, we've been working really hard to overhaul the USC's policy library. So this year alone, we've created the tuition and hopefully today this student financial aid policy papers. We've done this in an attempt to create a really solid foundation for the USC's policy library moving forward. A lot of the papers were really outdated and needed to be kind of refreshed. So we've replaced, I think it was just the general affordability paper with 3 more targeted, specific, and evidence-informed papers that I think will be really a good staple for the USC's policy library moving forward. And then our advocacy intern is also working on a paper on student fees as well that we're hoping to have finished before the end of the year. And then we're also, we've done 1 round of consultations already with both the internal the University Affairs and External Affairs standing committees on an experiential learning paper, as well as mental health policy paper. So each of these kind of also being staples to the USC's policy library. Experiential learning will be amalgamating 3 current papers that exist. So one was on student employment, one was on experiential learning specifically for non-STEM students, and the other one was just a paper on work integrated learning. So all of them were about experiential learning, but none of them were labeled as experiential learning. So we put them all together. We're going to create a really strong paper for experiential learning. And then mental health also, we know, has been a really big kind of side effect of COVID-19. We know it's been really drastically impacting students. So not only are we consulting the council standing committees, but myself and my associate student experience have also been running a mental health roundtable that we're also going to be consulting. And then I've also been consulting some admin on the side of like the departments that would impact. So doing a lot of consultations on those papers. So look to see them at February Council. But this is like a really huge win. I don't know if everyone realizes how much work goes into creating policy papers. And the hope is that by the end of this year, we'll have 5 new papers. And the usual standard is like 2 or 3. So that's a big, big win for the USC this year. Moving on to the student experience side, I've been working with Jenny, the AVP Student Experience, to look at some mental health data from the last semester. So analyzing the ways students use different resources at Western and how we can better support them in the semester ahead. As well as Matthew, the ESS coordinator, and I met with Equity and Human Rights Services and the director of the Student Support and Case Management kind of office regarding the improvements to racism reporting. So we're working on some interim improvements that can be made to the current reporting system until this can be permanently situated in the new AVP EDI office. So that's something that we're just working with them to provide, and we'll continue to keep tabs on it. And then the last point there in the student experience portion talks about our student kind of EDI network, but I'll take a step back and just mention that Bertha and Nicole, which is Western's anti-racism advisors, have started what they're calling Western's EDI Action Network. So my role, the Vice President University Affairs, will continue to sit on this network, as well as the Ethnocultural Support Services Coordinator to represent undergraduate students. And then there's also a number of campus stakeholders a part of this action network. And then what we're doing internally as well is we're hoping to host, or we are hosting, I've already sent out the invitation, to all of the cultural, religious, and accessibility focused clubs on campus to facilitate a discussion with the anti-racism advisors, because they're also looking to understand, I guess, how students perceive the work that Western is doing and what equitable and inclusive campus looks like to students. So we'll be facilitating that conversation with those club groups in the coming weeks. On the COVID-19 response, I wanted to give everyone an update on residents so that they have just an idea of kind of what the current state of things are. So residence is currently closed roughly until the end of the stay-at-home order. I know in-person classes right now are not scheduled to continue until after reading week. So they're going to keep their eyes on the announcements coming from the government, and then if it's appropriate to move students back, they'll create a plan to do so, probably in a staggered approach. And then if not, they'll look to reevaluate the reimbursements that students will receive based on the amount of time that they haven't been in residence. And so for those of you who I guess are not already aware, students are receiving reimbursements for the amount of time that they haven't been in residence. So since they left in final exams up until, I guess, like reading week or whenever students come back. And this reimbursement is being calculated based on the cost of their room, the meal plan overhead, and the amount of ResNet used over the course of the year. It's divided monthly. So students will be getting that reimbursement on their student center. They're expected to receive it as of mid-February. The reason for that being that if the stay-at-home order gets extended and residence continues to stay closed, they'll reevaluate that amount, and then they'll give it to students all in one lump sum rather than having to do multiple transactions. So that's the reason why the payment is not scheduled to go through until February. And it'll just be added as a credit to students' accounts, so they can put it towards like their tuition for next year if they want to. Like, it's their money, they can take it out, or they can use it towards other costs at Western, but it's totally their choice. And then also for students who have not returned to residence, they are able to arrange a time to go back to residence and pick up any of their key items that they want, as well as residence was also mailing academic resources, medications, essential items, things like that to students free of charge regardless of where they are. So that's something that residence was, housing and residence was doing. But for those who are interested in going back to residence, there actually are students in residence. So although residence is closed, they have made exceptions for students who don't have safe living environments, don't have good Wi-Fi connection. They're being evaluated on a case-by-case basis, like international students, anybody that had a predetermined flight to come back. So those were all cases in which students were approved to come back to residence, and they're continuing to do that. So if you know of someone, or you are someone who needs to be in residence for whatever reason, that is something that you can still request. And then also on the COVID-19 response, I put it under this section because Mark mentioned it in his budget as well, but I'm just finalizing. We're introducing some new awards this year. We're looking to increase the amount and the type of awards that we're giving to students, also to reflect our priority on EDI this year, and specifically within this portfolio. I think it's really important, and it's something that I've been working with my coordinator to kind of organize, but she's on a leave of absence right now, so I'm just waiting for her to come back. And then I've also asked for this investment to be sustainable, which is why you see it in the budget, so that, moving forward, this can be something that sticks around. And then I was going to take the university budget section off my slides, but we had some exciting things happen, so I thought I'd leave it here and give you a bit of an update. As a refresher, we had 4 themes to our university budget submission: student financial aid, work integrated learning, EDI, and sustainability. Since our submission in November, Western has implemented our paper towel bin pilot program. So 37 paper towel only bins have been installed in the UCC in every bathroom. So hopefully that'll help to diverse the 17% of waste that paper towels contribute to campus. And then hopefully they'll extend that program and expand it from the UCC in the future, but that's very exciting because it's been kind of a brainchild for me since second year, so I'm very excited. And then the other thing is that the AVP EDI office that we requested in that budget submission, the structure has been approved through Senate in December, and so I'm hopeful that this role will be hired before the start of next year, but it is something that was a success from our budget submission and something that we're excited to see for Western moving forward. So sorry that was really long. But I will happily take any questions. I just know there was a lot of important things to touch on there.
Actually, I have a question for you, Vic.
Yeah.
The residence reopening. So like we've talked about this before, but I work in residence as a desk clerk, and there has been, so we do have like students in the building, but there have been no kind of like adjusted health and safety measures actually within the building to kind of reflect that. And there's been no messaging to like the actual staff from res ops around anything to do with students returning to the building and health and safety measures that we can start taking to like protect ourselves with those returns. So I was wondering if it'd be possible for you to kind of like advocate to res ops that maybe this has been a continuous theme and a continuous frustration for like staff, is that there's been absolutely no communication around outbreaks or like proper like health and safety measures or anything like that. And even like some of like the COVID reporting mechanisms, like the return to work questionnaire, are not enforced, and we do not get reminders, and it's an inaccessible interface to do that on. So I was hoping like maybe that could be something that you escalate to the appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, obviously we don't see all the ins and outs of communication, so I appreciate you bringing that forward. I can definitely touch base about that. And I know because you've mentioned it in the past, but also because we've heard it from a number of students that the communication on the housing side specifically has not been amazing this year. So it is something that we've kind of looped back on just in terms of like new start to the semester, like let's figure out like if you're going to communicate with students, like how are you going to do that? Can we help you amplify that messaging? But it's good for us to know specifically where the kind of pain points are in their communication, because I can point that out to them and provide some recommendations as to how they should communicate to students moving forward and staff.
Yeah, and then just a small follow-up to that, there are duty staff in the building, but they are not on duty until like residence is fully operational again, which means that there are no health and safety guidelines being followed by students currently.
Duty staff being like res staff?
Yes, so there are people who are technically dons in the building, but they are not required to be on staff or on duty right now. And so it means like none of the health and safety guidelines that are being communicated by housing to the students are actually enforced in any kind of meaningful way right now.
Okay, that's good for me to know too. Thanks, Eva. I will bring that up to them for sure. Any other questions on update? Awesome. Okay, I'll throw it to Mac then.
Hello. It's nice to see you guys after a 2-month-long break, but I can go into quickly a little bit of the stuff I've been doing over the last 2 months. 2 things that happened actually today that I want to highlight for 2 advocacy wins, because I think it's important to highlight them, because especially with government advocacy, it moves slow, but when it does move, it's a little bit exciting. So today the LTC voted to increase the amount, the word is escaping me, the frequency of almost all bus routes in the city. So even though students aren't riding the bus as much, the routes are increasing through COVID-19. So that's something that like literally just happened. And then the other thing was provincially, we had an awesome win today through the Ministry of Universities and Colleges. They put forward kind of like a bill to mandate all universities update their sexual and gender-based violence policies to mandate that students cannot be questioned about their former sexual history at all, and that students will not be penalized for their use of drugs or alcohol or other intoxicants for the disclosure. So they won't have any like cross appeals and those kinds of things for fear of disclosure. So this is really, really exciting because the press release quoted USC saying that we were the reason that this happened and that they took directly from our policy paper. So when you elect those USC delegates, it is very, very important who you're electing. And I'm also going to flag that elections are happening next council meeting. Applications will be out soon, so check that out. But if you're interested in shaping meaningful provincial policy, this is your chance. So high-level updates from USC as well. Right now I'm working on creating the 2021-2022 organizational budget, consulting all the different schools and where we're going to allocate the funds for the next year. I'm also doing a little bit of prep for USC GA in March and writing a student author compensation internal policy. So that again is one of the reasons why my provincial line was upped by $500. We currently USC currently doesn't pay all of our student authors. If they're also like an associate under us, then they do get paid. But we think it's important that we compensate students fairly for their work that they're doing for USC. So we're working on an author compensation policy through USC and also have updated USC budgets to reflect this change. On top of this, UCRU is moving really fast. So there's a lot of updates here, but I'll try and keep it brief. Our lobby week was successfully completed with 40+ meetings. The one meeting that I noted on the left and I'm most proud of is we met with Carla Quattro, the Federal Minister of Employment, Workforce Development, and Disability Inclusion. She is the minister directly responsible for student financial aid, Canada student loans, and Canada student grants. So when I tell you that I am bringing your policy needs to the highest possible office, with this meeting you have to believe me because hire is Justin Trudeau, but he's not specifically on this. So I'm going to quote this as the highest possible office to take this issue too. So very, very exciting for UCRU for that meeting. Other than that, UCRU bylaw consultations are starting tomorrow. So you've heard me talk over the past couple of months about UCRU formalizing and how we're creating bylaws and incorporating as a corporation. So the board of directors at UCRU has done a lot of consulting between the executives at the different student unions about what our bylaws are going to look like. And we're finally at a place where we have bylaws that we can show to each of the student unions. This has been like literally 8 months of my life dedicating towards this. So we're likely going to bring this to the external advocacy committee as well as the governance committee for the next round of council. So you guys can have your input about this organization. And I won't say anything more because there's a big package you guys will be getting. And on top of that, we're working on creating an organizational strategic plan to ensure that once we do formalize, we have some direction to go off of in the next couple of years. And then as well, we had recent federal wins regarding international students achieving permanent residency. So they won't have any, if their work kind of requirements were disrupted because of COVID-19, they'll be able to apply for an additional permit to get more time to create those work requirements in order to get permanent residency. And we also had the undergraduate awards of NSERC increased by 25%. So again, all the advocacy wins come at the same time and it's always in January, but it is very exciting. On top of that, one thing that I didn't put there that I'll note is that UCRU is launching a Canada-wide environmental sustainability survey in the next month or two across all of our campuses. So I would definitely watch out for that to share to your constituents. As for policy papers, we're going to talk about the student financial policy paper right after this. Lots of work, and I'll leave that there. And I'm also working with Victoria to consult for the experiential learning paper, as well as the student mental health paper. And then finally, Municipal Lobby Week was successfully completed with the budget passing with student priorities intact. London's going to start implementing the green bin project in 2022. And if you're interested in participating in those consultations, let me know. I already distributed them through the external advocacy committee. They know I'm very active in our Facebook group chat, but if anybody else would like to participate, always open. And then I would implore you to check out my favorite TikTok of the moment. It's the Toxic Love Shack Dragula mashup that I'm sure you all know. It's stuck in my head constantly, but I also know the dance, but unfortunately will not do it today. So I will open it up to questions if anybody has them. All right, and I'm sure I'll hear a lot from you guys next time when we consult about those UCRU bylaws. And I'll pass it to Hannah.
Okay, hi everyone. I hope everyone is having a good evening. So just a couple updates. Obviously, with the lockdown and stay-at-home order, that has changed some of our programming for this semester. But I'll get into that a little bit more later. Just some updates from December. Peer support and food support services. We're involved in our late night pizza event, where we went to different student neighborhoods and handed out pizzas during exam time. We were able to provide a lot of students with resources during exams, which was, I think, really beneficial to our services, because ahead of lockdown, we really wanted to get the word out about a number of our services. As well, they had a really fun gingerbread decorating contest over the break. Vic highlighted it a bit in her update, but Peer Support just released a resource guide for community and on-campus resources, so I definitely recommend checking that out and sharing it with your constituents. For the time being, until the stay-at-home order is lifted, food support services is operating completely virtual. So if students submit a hamper request, they'll receive some sort of support through virtual means until we get back to our more hybrid hamper model. The peer programs have been involved in a significant number of campaigns recently. One of which I just wanted to highlight from December was their diversity and elections campaign, and a lot of them were sharing the USC content, as well as doing a number of campaigns themselves. And I think almost all of them have campaigns on the go right now, so definitely check out their Instagrams. They're doing a lot of really, really great work. We are preparing for a number of awareness events and weeks and months right now. So as was highlighted earlier, is Holocaust Awareness Week. For tomorrow, I know there's a really important event with the survivor testimony that Halal has organized. Definitely would recommend taking some time to check that out. The executive is going to be there, and we think it's really important, so please check that out. Next week is Indigenous Awareness Week, so we're going to be uplifting a lot of content that is being shared throughout the community. Right now, our Indigenous Student Support Services are doing a campaign with our Indigenous Relations Committee to talk about how to provide more education to students, and specifically international students, around the Indigenous lands that Western sits on. We are preparing for Black History Month. We are preparing for International Women's Day. There's a lot of things on the go in terms of these awareness weeks, but we're really excited. Just to highlight in terms of the programming committee, there's been a lot of work that's put into both trying new initiatives as well as preserving traditions and programs that are really important to Western students, as well as to the USC programs that provide them. Obviously, one of which I've already highlighted, late night breakfast, we transferred into our late night pizza event in December. But as well, USC Charity was able to maintain their children's holiday event that they normally do in December, and packaged over 100 gift boxes that were given to children in the London community. So very, very proud of that committee for the work that they're doing. One event that I wanted to highlight that you should all check out that will be coming out soon is our sustainability event, which is our sustainable fashion show type virtual website that Public Arts, USC Charity, and EnviroWestern are collaborating on. As well, we are bringing back some Rick's nights with some different twists on them, and we're going to have more virtual programming announcements coming in the next few weeks, which is exciting as well. Lastly, for orientation, our hiring timeline is still on pause. We should have updates, I think, in the coming weeks, but that timeline is currently paused. So yeah, I'm happy to take any questions that folks may have. Yeah, I see Jessica.
Hi. Just regarding the hiring timeline for orientation, a concern I've heard from first year students that are considering res staffing is just the fact that, you know, this is kind of the season to like start signing leases and figure out if you want houses, but because the timeline hasn't even started for hiring, like they don't know whether they should sign a lease, if they're going to get the res they want. I just want to know if that's been considered, just with the timeline, if like I think I could tell them to like, I guess, alleviate any stress or give them any advice regarding this process.
Yeah, Well, I mean, the process, it will definitely be happening at some point. I do not know at this point when those applications will be released. That's definitely a consideration that has been taken into account in the conversations that we are having, and recognize that it could be potentially frustrating for first years that are looking to sign leases and maybe considering res soffing. However, I don't have any other updates at this point.
Thank you.
Right. Any other questions?
I think Counselor Tom had his hand up if he still wants to ask.
Jess, I had the same question as Jess.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? I don't see any. Okay, I'll pass it off to Mark.
Awesome. Thanks, Hannah. Awesome. So I think it's funny because I think I presented most of what I've been doing for the last little while, but I'll go through it anyways and give you a bit of a brief of like maybe a bit more things of what I've been doing. So I think the big thing is obviously the budget. It's kind of taken up my last 2 or 3 months-ish, but I've been many other projects on the go. But again, it's mainly the long-term stability of the USC has been my priority, making sure that the student leaders that come through the USC continue to come to the USC and are compensated fairly. And I think that's kind of like where this whole budget came from. So I just wanted to highlight that again. I've been working a lot with Matt and our full-time management and the rest of the executive as well to make sure their priorities were seen. Bylaw 1, we did a full review of the bylaw. It's gone through board, council, the lawyers. You'll see the amendments come through. It's all pretty straightforward, but I just want to make sure that we're operating fully for the future. And I'll highlight elections quickly. I've just been supporting the EGC on the decisions they're making with elections. Obviously, I take a step away because of my role as an executive as we go into election season, but I did help support some of their echoing. If there's anything I can support them on interpreting policy, that's usually where I come in. But again, I step back a bit when it comes to the actual election season. And then effective communication, making sure people know about the new updates to bylaw 2 obviously happened in October. And so that's like, I've just been answering questions for students that reach out. And make sure that they're well informed or they're redirected to the EGC so they know how to interact with the election season itself. And the last piece, I'll just talk about clubs. I've been working with Neha a lot on the club spotlight. It's something we ran at the beginning of the year to make sure we showcase the last little bit of club memberships for the year. We're still seeing an increase in club memberships, which is awesome to see, especially within the online environment. So I'm excited to see that. We're starting to work on club ratifications, which is fun. I think we had over 70 applications this year. So considering we have a 200 club system, it's a lot to see. So we're excited to get through those. And I think we're starting with business clubs soon. So I'm excited to do that. And then again, the last part of this is making sure we're communicating well. Obviously a struggle with the change in environment to an online world, but I think our full-time staff have been doing a great job to make sure to stay in touch with students and the club members themselves. So I'm full to answer any questions you have, but I know most of it was I've already touched on. So, and again, Jutsu from Bellwoods Brewery's very good beer recommendation. If there's no questions, I'll throw it to Cam.
Great, thanks, Mark. And yes, I agree. I would second the fact that Jutsu is a great beer, but I'll kind of jump into my updates as well. So keeping my headings pretty broad. Digital communications has grown about 43% as of May 2020 levels, a ton of digital content rolling out over the next couple months. At the beginning of the year, we set an ambitious goal of 50% growth by the end of our year, and we are ahead of those timelines, so that uptake has been really great to see. We're working on analyzing some data in terms of social media and analytics about our engagement from this year as compared to last year. To further growth and really push the needle forward on our social media content. And this research is going to inform the strategies that we use kind of moving forward to build out digital content and working alongside my fantastic team to do that. Another big file for us this year has been COVID-19, as most of you have heard throughout my updates over the past couple of months. So we're still working alongside the Middlesex London Health Unit in the City of London to roll out essential health and safety messaging for students. We are keeping in touch very closely with them to ensure that our messaging is aligned and clear as lots of changes are happening and have been happening over the past couple of months. In terms of digital content highlights, lots of advocacy content has been rolling out over the past couple of months. I'm sure that you've seen Victoria's university budget submission, which was fantastic. And I will just give her a quick shout out right now because admin did say that she kind of pushed the needle forward on university budget submissions and really reinvented the game on that. So that was fantastic. And then same goes for the municipal budget submission. Mackenzie also wrote really quickly on that. And advocacy comms has been a very major focus for us this year. We've been having a lot of productive conversations at the Advocacy Steering Committee this year to understand how we can connect better with students. And if you folks do have suggestions about how we can, communicate our advocacy, whether it may be student feedback or whether it may be some of our wins to students, always happy to hear those. So feel free to send me a message or send me an email, always happy to chat. And then really ensuring that students are in the loop about our major initiatives that are launching. So things like the Club Spotlight, which Mark's portfolio launched earlier this semester, as well as initiatives like late night pizza and student feedback, things like that. There are lots of things happening over the next couple of weeks, and because of the changes that have happened based on COVID-19 guidelines, there has been a lot of pivoting. We want to ensure that students are as informed as possible, and we are creating as many touch points with students as possible. Moving on to campaigns, elections has been a big focus for us this year, and this semester especially, and it's been taking up most of my time over the past couple of weeks, ensuring that there are resources and information for elections getting out there, as well as engagement, get out the vote, and a 3-part equity-based campaign. So we've seen some engagement from our alumni as well as student leaders and our peer programs. Our peer programs have been great partners in ensuring and kind of highlighting the fact that students from all backgrounds do need to vote in the elections. A major focus of this elections process has been ensuring that every student who wants to run is provided with the resources that they need to run, and that they're on an even playing field with folks that, might be inside of the USC bubble, or who might be a lot more familiar with the elections process. We just want to make sure that students, all students from all backgrounds who are interested in running are able to. I will ask of you guys to please share the content, because we do want to ensure that students are as informed as possible heading into the elections and that they turn out to the polls. I don't think I need to explain to you guys how important voting is, and how much of an impact it does truly make. So that would be great. And then again, Black History Month has been a project that we're working on as well, working alongside Hannah's team to pull together a committee with student groups like Ethnocultural Support Services and the cultural clubs on campus to ensure that we're kind of aligned on our programming and initiatives. We'll also be developing some content on our end alongside Counselor Omarodian, who's going to be serving as a resource on our Black History Month committee. So big shout out to Jess for her involvement in that. Moving on to executive recruitment. So applications for the hired roles have already launched. They launched earlier this week. So Vice President Communications and Public Affairs, Governance and Finance, and Student Support and Programming are now open. Vice President University Affairs and External Affairs nominations will open on the 29th. So if you are interested, please keep an eye out. Again, we are really asking you to share to ensure that we're getting as vast and diverse a candidate pool as possible. And if there are those of you out there who are interested in applying or running for these positions and would like to chat, please feel free to reach out to any member of our executive team or sign up for shadowing. I know that all of the folks on our team are always super happy to chat. So we'd love to see you come out. And then in terms of communications initiatives, still conducting and engaging with interviews with local and national media outlets. And then we are also developing a digital atrium to ensure that the USC experiences and services can be accessed easily, which will be launching early in February. That's going to kind of replicate all of the services that you might find inside of the UCC, things like food support services, the peer support center. We have reached out to the faculty and affiliate councils to see how you would like to be highlighted. So there is a section there for you folks to kind of promote some of the events, initiatives, and some of the communications that you're doing to your student bodies. If you have not received anything from us, or if you don't know what I'm talking about, please feel free to send me a message after my update. USC faculty councils, committees, clubs will all be able to booth, run programming, share information. So we would love to have your involvement. And if you would like to include some information, just feel free to reach out to me. We're continuing our rebranding with the student support and programming portfolio. So you will have seen some updates on the peer programs and peer support, visual identities, and our graphics team has been working hard to give like a much needed refresh to many of these groups. So there is more to come. State of the USC was also a big part of our portfolio. It was great to see a lot of you come out last week. Thank you so much. We've had more than 100 people turn out to the event, and it was wonderful to reflect on the accomplishments that we've, seen so far, and great to vision for the future. And I know that a couple of you won some big prizes in trivia, so I'm glad to see that you guys were paying attention to these council meetings. The last thing that I wanted to touch on quickly was that the communications structuring, portfolio restructuring. So I've touched on this a couple of times throughout the year, but the communications portfolio, or at least how it stands now, is fairly new with the focus on strategic communications and public affairs. And we've noticed that there isn't enough infrastructure within the organization for this portfolio to function, to its potential. So we're really setting up a framework and building infrastructure to ensure that whoever comes into the role after me is able to just kind of build their portfolio up from there and have the resources that they need to succeed. So we have been, working alongside our really fantastic student staff to ensure that we're supporting student development and also giving them the opportunity to create communications through a student-facing lens. And then over the next several months, I'll be leading the restructuring and hiring of full-time staff for the communications portfolio ahead of the hiring of my incoming and transition of my incoming to ensure that they have the opportunity to transition properly. I'll leave it there for now. And if folks have any questions, happy to take them now.
All right. If there are no other questions, we can keep moving. Thank you for your updates. And then I can just, all right. So we can move on to our motion here to accept the council updates. So if you go on to Turning Point, please go and vote quickly.
Megan, I don't think there was a seconder on that. Just heads up.
Oh, good eyes. Sorry, I'll need a seconder actually.
Councillor Tom.
Councillor Biswer, I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, now we can go and vote.
Yeah, can we close the polls in 3, 2, 1? And motion carries unanimously.
All right, great. Okay, we can move on to the University Affairs Committee's items. All right, President Reister, did you want to speak to this motion?
I think I'm going to turn it over to those who have worked really, really heavily on this. So I think we're going to lead it off with Vice President Matt Caff.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. So I'm going to give a quick spiel and then I will open it up to Victoria if she has anything to add, because obviously advocacy is a joint effort between our two portfolios. But the first thing I'm going to do is shout out my associate, Ann Campbell. She wrote the bulk of this paper over Christmas break and really did all the heavy lifting. I told her what the PCRs were and she came up with really, really good body text. So she gets a shout out for all this work and that's why she's credited as the main author on this paper. But I also wanted to thank you counselors for the rounds of consultation that we do on this. I know we sprung some meetings on you in December, but we definitely took all of your feedback into account as we highlighted at the second round of consultations. And as we saw earlier in the motion, when we motioned to change part of the policy paper, that was because we had another great recommendation from Victoria's committee to add a specific scholarship for LGBTQ plus students, recognizing the different challenges they face in accessing post-secondary education. So we are trying to be as flexible as we can. And again, just stressing that It's a little bit easier for me with things like student financial aid on the OSAP side. It is really, really complicated, but I have great organizations like USA who can help me with policy paper. Victoria did a lot of consultations with university administrators to just even figure out how the student financial aid system works here. Because if you're not eligible for student financial aid, it's hard to find out. But also if you are eligible for student financial aid, it's also hard to find out. And as a student who was on OSAP all 4 years of my undergrad and had student financial aid as one of the core parts of my platform, this policy paper is also really, really close to my heart and enshrining, firstly, a lot of the things that USC was already doing. A lot of these things are things you saw in my federal and provincial budget submissions that were passed at council. Now that will be in standing policy, that will be stances for the USC for years and years and years to come. So I was very thankful for the consultation we got at both committees, which unanimously passed and endorsed both of these papers. So Victoria, if you don't have anything to add.
No, I don't think so. Just that we got some positive feedback from the university admin as well. And that this paper, along with the tuition paper and hopefully the fees paper, whenever it's done, will be kind of like the holy trifecta of like, you know, financial support, advocacy for the USC moving forward. So we're really excited to be presenting this this today and hopefully be finishing off the trifecta before the end of the year.
And then just to build off how this connects to the tuition policy paper that was kind of commissioned earlier this year. As you can see by the fact that we wrote 20+ page documents on both topics, we separated them for a very conscious reason because we know they're both super in-depth topics that can become super complicated if you're trying to get into the nitty-gritty of positive changes you want for students. So that is why these two different things were separated and why we have a different policy paper here.
All right, thank you. So I'll be looking for a seconder for this motion.
Counselor Kotadia, I can second this.
Okay, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, we can open up the floor for debate, and I think Counselor Folia wanted to go.
Are there not questions first?
Oh, yes, sorry. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, seeing no questions, then we can move on to debate. Thanks, Councillor Folia.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is probably going to take a minute, so I want to say sorry about that first. I'm also going to say sorry because basically I'm going to bring forward a motion to table this motion, basically for the reason that there's quite a lot of what I believe to be like major edits that need to be made to this paper to make it more successful, which are too large to be fixed in like just a single amendment. And so I have a couple of examples of these. So the first issue is in the section regarding Western University on bursaries. We basically in this section, we're under advocating for our international students. We cite a 65% increase in international tuition between 2006 and 2015. And personally, I thought that was low for Western, and so I looked into the citation. And the cited value is from a group of Ontario universities and not Western specifically. On that same citation, it gives the citation that they have for Western. And so with some digging, I found that in a 10-year period from 2008 to 2018, the international student tuition has grown by approximately 90% compared to 40% of general student tuition increase. So basically here in this first one, we're significantly under advocating for our international students to Western University. And then the second major issue that I wanted to bring up is in the section to the government on expected contribution of students. And it basically says 63% of students indicate that they were the sole financial contributor for their post-secondary education. And I believe that statistic is incorrect. And following the reference for that statistic, the information is from USA, a study that they did, which notes that 63% of students have spent their personal invested money for paying tuition, not that they're the sole contributor. And so that's a big issue because some of the rest of the section to the government is based on that stat. So that's an issue in itself. And so just to finish up, I want to say that I believe this policy paper is really valuable and a great initiative, but I think that it has to be like very complete and thorough in order to properly advocate for our students on both the university and government level. So I will finish this by motioning to table this motion to allow for further editing and review.
Yeah, I can respond to that quickly if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
No, I'm just gonna
Need a seconder for the motion just before we get into any debate on the motion. Just because if we don't have a seconder, then we can't even proceed with it. So I think we'll start there.
Counselor Ali, I can second that.
Okay. Are there any questions about the proposed amendment? Okay, if there's no questions, then we can move on to debate.
Yeah, I would just like to add that I did double check these citations as Anne sent them in. And obviously when you go down a rabbit hole, things get really difficult. But I would also just like to speak to the heart of the motion, which is the principles and concerns and recommendations that are in this policy paper that I believe do support international students and do show some of the concerns that students have around affordability. Obviously, I can't double check the things that he is citing as we go through this policy paper. I can't keep up and like talk about them in the moment, but I would also ask that this is what our kind of consultations are for when we bring them to the External Advocacy Committee and when we bring them to the University Affairs Committee as well. So if we had heard this through the consultation process, kind of like we had been asking, we would have been able to make these changes in advance. And unfortunately, I just can't respond to super in-depth things like that in the moment, but I thank the counselor for their feedback.
Okay, I think the first hand I saw afterwards was Counselor Prue and then Counselor Mendez after Counselor Prue.
Hi, so I am speaking for the amendment, but I first want to start by saying how much I appreciate the amount of work that has gone into this policy paper, and I understand how much research and time spent writing. And I guess my first question, I'll ask a question followed by a bit of a statement. Is there anything that would do harm by tabling this motion for another month? Is there some reason that this needs to be out immediately and can't be absolutely perfect so that we are ensuring the best advocacy? So maybe I'll start with that.
I would say that there is no like major reason to answer right away. The main thing that is important for these the policy paper is the principles, concerns, and recommendations. We can table the paper and look back, but we can also pass the principles and concerns and recommendations and then just review the body text, which I would also like to highlight aren't as binding when we talk about policy. They're more just supporting arguments for somebody to look through as they like read the paper. So that's another alternative that we could do.
Okay, so my statement, I guess, is that I do really appreciate and I don't see any concerns with the current principles, concerns, and recommendations as they've been stated. And if there is room to make clerical edits afterwards, perhaps that can be up for discussion. The two concerns I particularly had with the policy paper is one, we requested the university that they look into another way to define financial aid other than OSAP. However, we don't provide any recommendations for anything else. And I just wonder if we have looked into that, and something that we discussed heavily when we were learning about advocacy in May was that providing recommendations to people is always better than telling them to fix something.
Yeah, I can answer that. Great catch, and I'm glad you were listening to our presentations, but I'll pass that off to Victoria.
Yeah, I can take that. So I just want to clarify that what the paper is asking is that they use a different benchmark for financial aid, just not a definition. And that's only because they use OSAP as a primary benchmark, but Western actually does use alternative benchmarks currently. They do like a student financial aid like profile, and they use some of those other things. So they do have other like metrics that they can use and more heavily weight. So I don't think it's a super big concern that we didn't list anything specifically, because they do have ones they can draw from and weight more heavily than they currently do OSAP.
And the other thing I want to add is that this is a pretty standard benchmark across other universities and something that is going to be very difficult to get the university off of. So the main thing here is just to get them thinking about other ideas and other ways that we can get around this. Though obviously OSAP has its flaws, which we point out in the subsequent several sections of the paper. Getting OSAP to amend those flaws would very greatly help that as a benchmark for university education. So the example I'm going to give is if, for example, tomorrow OSAP removed expected parental and spousal incomes, it would be a much greater benchmark for students in their financial aid. It would no longer pose those barriers. So that's like another reason why we're suggesting other forms, because when we talk about the calculation of student financial aid at the federal, provincial level on top of the university aids, it gets really, really complicated. And we're just trying to kind of leave room for that in further advocacy.
Okay. I'm going to let Councillor Mendez voice his concerns, but I just double checked and I made a mistake. This isn't supposed to be debatable, so I'm going to let Councillor Mendez make his point because he already had his hand up. But after that, we're going to cut off the debate just because this wasn't supposed to be debated. That was my error. So we will take a vote right after that.
Thanks, Megan. I just wanted to bring up the point that, like, I do have to say that because it's not a debate, do I have to say if I'm in favor or against? Because
you already had your hand up, so I didn't want to cut you off after giving the other people who had their hand up a chance to speak.
Okay, thank you so much, Megan. I actually attended both meetings, and I know how much work went into actually getting these here to us today. And I think like the meat of it is the fact that the PCRs themselves have a lot of validity behind them. And I think like some of these things need immediate action. One thing I want everyone to draw their attention to is the fact that we're now going to be advocating for queer and two-spirited students to actually be getting that sort of advocacy work happening, because we don't really think about how many barriers there are for LGBTQ students to actually access post-secondary education. And I think that's work that needs to start immediately. And I think if we actually have it in paper, we can actually start that work now, as opposed to after February, where we only have realistically a month left before, there's a turnover and there's training. And I'd really like for our executives to be held accountable to actually be able to make those changes and have them cemented into policy.
Can I respond to that quickly, Megan?
Sorry, I'm going to cut the debate off there just because there wasn't supposed to be debate on this in the first place. That was my error. So we can just go on to voting on this motion. And so since we don't have it in turning point, we're just going to vote by hand. So if you are in favor of Councillor Folia's motion, please raise your hand.
Okay, Megan, just for point of information for my own clarity. So yeah. Are we voting currently on the proposed tabling of this motion as it stands right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is Councillor Folia's initial request to send it back to committee.
Again, just to be clear, if they want to send it back to committee, you need to use the raise hand function.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, and also I have Emily with me, so we're one screen.
Okay. You can private message me in the chat, Councillor Mendez, if you guys want to vote different ways, if you're comfortable with that. All right, if you can take your hands down, or actually, I guess we can just do There's a thumbs up emoji, right? I can't see the things at the minute.
I think a point of information is that the emojis will disappear after a certain period of time.
As a co-host, I can see like the number of them. So like it's okay if they disappear, but just pick any other emoji other than the hand if you are against this motion. So anything other than a hand if you do not want it to go back to committee. All right. Okay, the motion does not pass, so we will resume debate on this motion. Yeah, Councillor Barkhouse.
Yeah, I just want to speak in favor of this motion. I think Vice President Mackenzie Metcalf just did a really great job on this, and she explained everything really well at the Advocacy Standing Committee. And I agree with Councillor Mendez as well that it's better to just get it passed now so the USC can advocate on it and we can make changes as needed, like later on.
All right, thank you. Councillor Mendez.
I just wanted to reiterate something that, these PCRs, that they take a lot of work, and I actually really appreciate the level of commitment that Mackenzie and Victoria had in actually consulting us. I just in the future, I think that maybe more of us need to be consulted, but I think they did such a good job because they came to both our committees more than once. And maybe if we could get these just for the future to have these things come just posted in our Facebook group. I know that they were, but I don't think it was ever posted as one document. So I think people had trouble accessing them because there were two separate ones while they were still being worked on. So maybe in the future, if we could just have them as one document, because I think that the work that's been done is really amazing. And I think it was just really great to be part of that process.
All right, thank you. I believe VP Metcalf was next.
Hi, so I thank everybody for their kind comments, but I also want to kind of honor the things that were said before and noting that we want this policy paper to be as strong as we could be. So I was just hoping that maybe we could pass the paper, but noting those two citation issues that we could fix and just have approved by committee afterwards. I don't have voting power, so I can't do that. So I can ask that somebody do that. But I think that is a really good way to honor the work that this counselor did to look a little bit deeper into the paper, which I think we should commend as counselors. You're doing your job, but also kind of having the policy paper go forward so that we can advocate on these things while we're still in our term.
All right, thank you. Councillor Lee.
I just want to essentially reiterate what VP Metcalf just said. I think it is really important and very valuable what Councillor Foley has brought to the table. I think it is really important that we obviously apply a critical lens to our policy papers, regardless of how many consultation rounds it's gone through. And so I would very much commend the research and the time that the Councillor has put into doing that. In saying that, I would say that it, as it has already been noted, I think it is important that we pass the paper today with the understanding that obviously there is further work and further amendments that we can be revising and putting into place here, taking some of the comments that have been brought up on the floor. But it is important that we have at least a base passed so that we have something that we can use to advocate to administration with and for. So in saying that, while yes, I respect and agree and appreciate all of the comments and concerns that were brought up with this particular policy paper and do think they need to be escalated or implemented, it is important that we have something that we can at least work with moving forward. And so I would highly encourage us to pass the policy paper with the understanding that there are further edits to be made.
Thank you. Councillor Lee?
Yeah, speaking in favor of just passing it now, given that the next term is coming up soon, it's probably better to just have this in a timely manner. It's probably more practical too, given all the hard work everyone put into this.
VP Metcalf.
She forgot to raise her hand, lower it from before.
Okay. Counselor Lee, is your hand still up or?
Oh, I think I'm waiting for it to.
We should be good.
Okay. All right. Are there any further points of debate? Yeah, Counselor Folia.
I guess I can motion to take Mackenzie's advice for this and just pass the, sorry, I forget what they were called, PTR, ITR?
So we can have two options. We can pass the PCRs and review the body text, or we can pass the entire thing and review the things that you had mentioned before, if you could send them to me in an email. And then I'm not sure if we would rather me report back to council or report back to committee.
Sure. Let's motion to pass it as is, and we will review back with the committee. Does that sound okay, Mackenzie?
Sorry, you said pass it as is.
And review the edits with the committee.
Point of information, are we just passing the PCRs then and not the body text? And then editing the body text and bringing that back?
To clarify, the PCRs are the only thing that are really binding about this anyways. So like, yes, in theory, body text can really be edited whenever because it's just arguments to support it. The principles and concerns or recommendations are the things that we like really put in the heart of our recommendations. So we could just pass those and then edit the body text at committee.
Councillor Folia, what's your preference?
The second one.
Okay, so
Yes.
Pass the PCRs and review body text.
Sorry, no, just pass everything as is, and the kind of like Mackenzie said, like the body text, I guess, is editable.
Can you see where I'm typing in the speaker notes on the slideshow?
Yes, that looks great.
That's okay? Okay. I'll maybe let Melissa fix up the wording for the official records. But if people get the gist, then I'll look for a seconder for Councillor Folia's motion.
Councillor Terzet. I'll second.
Thank you. All right. Melissa, do you think it would be best to put this in as an amendment clause then?
So what I'm suggesting, and I'm just transferring it over into the main agenda so that everyone can see it if they're having trouble with this notes that you made. I'm suggesting that it's an amendment to the be it resolved clause. So what I would say is that be resolved that council approve the student financial aid policy paper, noting that amendments to the body text will be presented to the, you want it to go to both committees for review or just one committee?
I would prefer just external advocacy. We can do it at one and it can be open to everybody.
Yes.
Sounds good.
All right, perfect. Okay, Counselor Turzak seconded that amendment. That wording still fine with both of you?
I'll throw it in the chat so it's really easy for everyone to see.
Yep. All right, Counselor Folia, thank you. Okay, I'll just give everybody 1 minute quickly to read that over. And once you've had a chance to read it over, thanks, Counselor Turzak. Okay, if you are in favor of making this amendment, please do the thumbs up emoji in like the thumbs up emoji reaction. Yeah, Counselor Villanueva. All right, the amendment passes and we will go back to debate and proceed with the motion as amended. Are there any points of debate on the motion as amended? Okay, if there are no other points of debate, we can go and vote on Turning Point. So please go on vote on the motion as amended in Turning Point. All right, Melissa, if you don't mind closing the polls.
The motion passes unanimously.
All right, great. Next, we'll move on to governance and finance. Councillor Baldwin, did you want to speak to the motion?
Yes, absolutely. So this was something that came in for governance and finance. We had a discussion with it about 2 cycles ago, or last cycle now. All this motion does is adds the voting records to each available public motion. Currently, the records are available by request. So, somebody like the Gazette or any interested party could email Melissa and request the voting records for any publicly available vote. Now, all this does is streamlines the process and just attaches the voting record to the motion in the minutes. This only applies to public motions, so it doesn't apply to any votes for, say, VPUA or EA, or votes for like USA delegates, anything like that. So happy to answer questions about this motion.
Thank you. And can I get a seconder?
Councillor Deagle.
Thanks, Councillor Deagle. Did you want to speak to the motion?
I think Ryan covered it pretty well, but thank you.
Are there any questions? Okay, seeing no questions, we can move on to debate. Are there any points of debate? All right, seeing no points of debate, please go vote on Turning Point. All right, Melissa, if you don't mind closing the polls.
Sorry, forgot to unmute myself. The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Okay. All right, we have a motion from ACUSC. President Reeser, did you want to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I'll speak to it briefly, and then I'll probably turn it to Vice President St. Pierre as well. But I just wanted to say too that I just think there's been an incredible amount of work done on this by Mark and some of our governance team on the staff side and our lawyers and everything there. So this has definitely been a very thorough process. I'm really excited about some of the changes that come as a part of it. It's something that I like, again, as I hope all of you are realizing that like bylaw 1 is kind of the core document of what the USC is and how we operate. So it's really important that we've done this right. And I do really feel strongly that all the due diligence has been done. And as you saw in our presentation that happened earlier, we tried to outline any of the kind of more major changes that may be a little bit more confusing. So I just wanted to also open up that when we go into question, if there's anything more that you've kind of had a chance to sit on, we'd be open to discussing that obviously then, but I'll turn it to Vice President St. Pierre to say his piece on this as well.
I'll just echo what Matt said. I'm very happy to see this go through from committee level as well, and I appreciate everybody that's been able to talk to me about it. It's something I've been working on for a couple months now, so it's just great to see the work, and I appreciate everybody for consulting and working on it. So,
all right, thank you. Could I get a seconder for the motion?
Councillor Ali.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing no questions, we can move on to debate. Are there any points of debate? Okay, seeing no points of debate, please go vote on turning point.
I'm going to go ahead and close the polls in 3, 2, 1. And the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. All right, so that wraps up our for action section. Next up, we have a report from the Board of Directors.
Hey everyone, try to make this quick since we're close on time, but not a lot of updates from the board. The financial situation remains strong, our cash position remains strong, not very concerned there. Maybe in some more exciting news, we finished our round of recruiting for next year's directors. We're very excited to finally have the first gender balanced board at the USC. Representation is something that we've been focused on for a while. Since I've been on the board, we've had a grand total of 3 female or female presenting directors. So yeah, very excited about that. I love the support from everybody. And yeah, I just want to echo what Councillor Gomez said earlier today. Women are very often underrepresented in corporate settings, and especially the case here, and desperately needed. So we're really happy about it. And also, I think the board has been committed to EDI from quite a bit this year, and this kind of shows our progress. And more importantly, it shows that we're willing to start looking at ourselves when it comes to EDI before we look at the organization. It would be hypocritical for us to talk about EDI without dealing with the issues that we have at our board. So yeah, so very happy, and a huge thanks to Sienna, our President Kutadia, or hearing President Kutadia, who sat on the hiring panel as well. Her advice and her presence was really good, and she gave us a lot of really good insights. So moving on, another EDI related topic, and an initiative from President Reeser, as well as support from our senior staff. We have engaged with an EDI consultant to look at the USC's operations, create an assessment of our corporation from an EDI lens, and also provide some strategic recommendations there. We're very excited to see how that goes. We're still very early stages, but the board will get reports of that pretty regularly, so I'll be able to update you, or whoever comes after me will also be able to update you there. And finally, just touching on something that President Reeser said as well, the board was involved in the approval of those funds for the expanded peer support center and all those renovations. In there, I just want to highlight one thing. Obviously, spending has been something we've been careful this year, just because of the financial situations of students. So I just want to highlight that these funds actually came from reallocations of our current capital budget, and we won't be dipping into the reserve budget. So it was really more a reprioritization of certain things to provide our students with kind of those better spaces, as our president and Mark as well have been very kind of adamant about increasing our space use. So we are kind of creating better spaces and more spaces, but we're doing so in a pretty financially responsible way. And that's it for me. I'll grab any questions if anybody has any.
Megan just dropped off because of her internet. So if there's no questions, we can move on to the Governance and Finance Standing Committee report.
Awesome. Thank you, Dana. So obviously, a couple big updates from Governance and Finance. There was the standing committee, or there was the voting record standing resolution. So as you all passed, we also reviewed executive budget updates for November. So that was, past that, so that was good. No big issues there. And then also, of course, we looked over the Bylaw 1 updates, and I know, sure everybody's heard about it, but I really wanted to give a huge thanks to Mark and Matt for really, being really, they came to our committee multiple times with the Bylaw 1 updates, and really gave a lot of feedback from the committee and really helped us to really understand it. That's how it got passed so easily at council today. So thank you again to the both of you. Moving forward, obviously this is, we like to say, Government and Finance, this is our time to shine with the, the budget coming up. So just want to let you all know, February 3rd at 7 p.m. is our special committee meeting for the budget. So that's what Mark is talking about when he's saying he's going to go line by line. So you will find that I will be posting the Zoom link in the Facebook group soon. Make sure you can all come out. You're all welcome to be there, and we'll go through it in really great detail. And Mark will be happy to answer all of the questions and show you all the big numbers. So lots of good things happening there. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Okay, if there's no questions, we can move on to the Advocacy Standing Committee report.
Alrighty, so last month we had the opportunity to consult on the experiential learning PCRs as well as the mental health PCRs. That was a really great time. Definitely got some great feedback, and we'll be reviewing those again moving forward. As I mentioned in the Zoom chat, I will be scheduling the upcoming EASC meeting for February sometime before this weekend, and I'll have those details to the broader council by Monday afternoon at the latest. So I'm assuming we'll probably be doing our further review of the financial aid policy paper and PCRs at that particular meeting. So I'll have those details available to you as soon as possible so that anyone who is not on that same committee but who would still like to consult definitely has the opportunity to do so. So other than the consultation on the policy paper and those two aforementioned PCRs, it was a pretty uneventful month, but definitely very productive. Not a lot of large issues came up, but I can definitely field any questions if anyone has any. I can do that now, or feel free to message me later.
Thanks, Councillor Ali. Sorry, my Wi-Fi wasn't cooperating. Next up, we have student experience.
Yeah, so at our recent meeting, we went over the student financial aid policy paper with Victoria, and then we also discussed the two upcoming PCRs as well. And we had a really great discussion surrounding them, so I'm excited about those. We do have two meetings coming up. So the first one's on February 3rd at 5 p.m., so before the governance and finance meeting. We're going to be going over applications for the executive hiring committee. And then the following week on the 10th at 5 p.m., so the same time, we're going to be going over the two PCRs with Victoria again. And we'll be posting this information in the Facebook group if you guys would like to come. It'd be great to have you guys there.
All right, thank you everybody for your reports. Since there are no forward discussion items, we can move on to new business. Does anybody have anything for new business? Okay, if there's no new business items, I'll look for a mover to terminate.
Councillor Ali?
Councillor Mendes.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mendes and Councillor Ali. If there are no objections to termination, I will see you all very soon. I'll be sending out a February schedule via email tonight because we have a busy month, but yeah, thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Megan.